Okay. So Lindsay from Freedom Media, we're going to jump right into it. I'm just trying to see if I can pick up the time. 2:45, apologise for that. We did schedule this live for 2 o'clock. It's been absolutely mayhem here trying to figure out compatibility between our encoder and Michael from Cafe Lockout. He's the way that he streams. So as I said, we are going to jump straight into this live. And as you can see in the studio, Michael from Cafe Lockout.
Okay,
welcome to the studio, Freedom Media Studio, and welcome to Perth.
Thank you, Lindsay.
So that, and you've been here for near on a week now.
Yeah, that's correct. This time, yeah.
And I guess when you first, you told me you had sent a message when you were coming across the Nullarbor.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another, and here we are today.
Yeah.
And we sort of, have been intermittently programming this stream, and I guess we're both wanting to talk about a few things, and both wanting to get some reactions of through your lens of how that's seen. Of course, over in Melbourne, and have experienced and seen some things, and we're going to bring you some footage of some of the things that Michael's going to do, and then similarly, with through the lens of what we've seen here in Freedom Media WA. And there's a couple of things, a couple of interesting things that at the beginning of as we were prepping for this, you said, it's really about how do we go forward?
Yeah, correct.
And healing. So we will have some comments like there. I'm just going to see, Clayton, if you wouldn't mind, just refresh the screen so we can see it's live on Facebook. No, the top one on the computer. Yep, scroll up maybe. No, so I'm going to just duck off camera and just, because if that's not pushing out live.
Do we need to hit go live on this one?
No.
Yeah, you're live.
There we are.
Ah, okay.
Just a few technical issues.
So,
Those with
so there we go, just a little bit of a lag there.
Wow,
As I said, so we are going to, thank you very much, Christy, we'll just, mate, if you can enlarge the comments as well, so we can just see that. So just done a bit of a quick introduction. I guess the script's gone out the window because we've just been pulling cables out left, right and centre, and I've had Travis, I guess, on the phone. Thank you very much, Travis. I know that you're probably watching the start of the stream. For your tech advice, we wouldn't be getting this to Michael's platform at the same time.
Absolutely.
If it wasn't for the guidance that he's just given that. So I guess, Michael, in coming across the border, and the last time that I know that you were here was Anzac Day.
Yeah, we crossed the border unvaccinated. Then we challenged the border. So, which was one of our intentions, because we don't think Australia should have borders. And so we challenged that, and remarkably we got across with just a fine. It was just an entry fee,
And I guess, sorry mate, whatever's happening there, if we can just have that volume down.
Yeah, so it was... when we were at Ceduna, the first time we were coming across when we were doing the big tour, at Ceduna there was all these people from WA, like refugees, living in Ceduna, from taxi drivers to funeral directors to waiters to all these people just trying to live in Ceduna because they were terrified of the border. Because the way they were marking it was like there was absolutely iron, there was no way you were getting through. So we went there, it's a hell of a drive, in our little truck and with Wendy's Winnebago just to see if we could get across, and it was just so easy to get across. It was all bullshit, and we get there. I mean, I've told everyone knows this story, but I get there and we had to sign a good to go form, which we signed there, and
that's with the WA police?
Yeah,
the G2G?
Two young police officers come up to the window, and here's this little truck with end mandates on it, and they're looking at the truck and they're looking at me and they go, "You haven't filled in your vaccination status." I said, yeah, I'm unvaccinated. I said, we're unvaccinated, the team. And they're just looking at me. Like, what do we do? And they're looking at each other and they go, you can't come in. I'm saying, yeah, but what if we do? We'll arrest you. Okay, then what? And they're just looking at each other. They go, if you go forward, you will be arrested. I said, I know, I heard you. What does that mean? You're going to chase us down the road like the Blues Brothers? You're going to throw us in Fremantle, Kalgoorlie jail? What does that mean? And they were just baffled. They're just looking at each other and they went, fine. I said, how much? They said, $1,000. And I said, each? And they said, yeah. I said, okay. They said, okay. What, you're going to do it? I said, yeah, we're going to do it. And then we entered and they stopped us straight away, took our mug shots and then let us go. We had a $1,000 fine each and we had to get to a place called Coolin where we had to isolate in this Airbnb house. It's the only place we could find. And we had 24 hours. It took us ages to get there. And we just, 7 days we were in there. The cops kept driving past. But eventually, we're constantly expecting the SWAT team to jump in and grab us, because of the fear in the propaganda. But nothing. After that, nothing. We drove. After that, we drove to Perth, hung around Perth for a while, and then drove all the way around Kalgoorlie, all around the south, all the way up to north and right out of the state, stopping at every town, talking about COVID, doing live streams from everywhere. Nothing. Never saw the police again. Never stopped us.
I guess, just hearing that when you say 2 young cops, it's either that's their first, they've just logged on or started their shift first ever at the border, or they haven't come across anybody that's just said, I've heard you, you've said you're going to arrest me, then okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and you mentioned the fear, and so you went there without the fear, but that example just simply, let's just go on the assumption that it wasn't their first hour that they've just been sent out to the border, that they've been there for a week, that they hadn't actually come across somebody with the mindset that was just saying, I'm not going to be a subject of this fear.
Yeah, that's right. We were nervous. I didn't want to end up in a Kalgoorlie jail. And that was the threat that you'd do. You'd end up in Kalgoorlie jail, they'd leave you there. There was all these, it was like the people in Ceduna and all the way South Australia, everybody was manifesting the fear. And even when we were coming across, there was a lot of people watching us simply to see whether we'd get it. And I remember watching the feed afterwards.
What had happened to you?
After the feed afterwards, they did it. Oh my God, they did it. It was like we'd achieved this, like getting across Checkpoint Charlie. And instead and you've got to remember, this is Australia. This is just a tiny little fruit and veggie border to stop, that's all it's for, to stop fruit and veg coming. And that's it. And it was extraordinary, And
I've said this many times, and I've pulled myself up, and it's just how quickly we get programmed to using the propaganda words like border, because Australia doesn't have borders.
No.
We have an international border.
Yeah.
We have state lines.
That's correct.
And this is a fruit and veggie state line.
Yeah.
And yet, we find, I guess interesting here, I've done many streams talking about the Emergency Management COVID-19 Amendment bills, which no ministerial oversight. It gives the Commissioner of the Police the ability to declare a 3-month COVID declaration here in Western Australia after we experienced 963 days of state of emergency, which is nothing by comparison.
No, but still, it's...
And where I was going with this is in that bill, there's extremely draconian pieces of law, but the one thing that they couldn't do was close the borders.
Oh wow! Because the Constitution stops it.
Because of the So and I thought of that at the time, and because there was so much that I was wanting to push people out to understand the significance that police can break into your home without a warrant and issue a direction to you to undergo a medical procedure if they feel that it will control the spread of COVID, that to get that out, that this is happening without actually telling people, Do you want to know why they can't close the borders? You know, and but I mean, an interesting story.
No, the interesting thing too, though, with that bill, that's why I admire so much these freedom fighters I'm meeting. They're still fighting for freedom, despite the fact that they've got this bill over their heads. I mean, we have the same. Dan Andrews got rid of habeas corpus. If he decides that I'm a threat, he can throw me in one of the concentration camps or Mickleham. No trial, no lawyer. I'm allowed, once a week, I'm allowed to write to the warden to say I think I should be let out. If he likes my letter, he can hand it to the CHO and the Chief Medical Officer, and then basically, apart from that, I stay there up to 2 years, maybe longer. If after 2 years they find out actually he was innocent, we shouldn't have done this, I can't do anything about it, and I have to pay for my incarceration whether I'm guilty or not. That's in the bill, and that got passed.
Wow. It's wow. I didn't know that. I'd followed it.
You don't know that we had because I was in the theatre company. One of the last plays on, we had a barrister. It was Melbourne's top barrister, one barrister of the year, and I brought it up with him, and he was going, "Oh, is that going through?" I said, "Going through? It's through. You're the top barrister. You don't realise this is through. This is law now. I mean, it has to be challenged. He hasn't done it. It's like your guy here. They haven't done it yet. But why have they got it? You know?
And that's the big question. And we've certainly seen, again here, some background. In Western Australia about 3 weeks ago, on a Friday, you had the AMA President of Western Australia coming out, just imploring McGowan to introduce mask mandates again. Because of the sudden rise of cases. The only way now that can be done is there needs to be a COVID declaration made. That's in place for 3 months. It not only gives a COVID-19 officer the ability to direct a person to wear a mask, but then it has all these far overreaching cases. Then West Australia on Saturday, the day after this, and I might say that Dr. Duncan Miller in that article, and it was a substantial article in the West Australian, he was quoted to say that people need to stop pointing the finger at those in the community that are wearing masks. In fact, you need to give them the thumbs up because they're doing the right thing by society. And then the follow-up in the article in the West Australian front page on Saturday was, expect mask mandates by Christmas.
Wow.
That was signalled 3 weeks ago, West Australian newspaper, front page, which of course is Kerry Stokes, Mark McGowan. We've seen the relationship there that came out with and play the ball, not the man, but the Clive Palmer defamation case. And we saw what Mark McGowan did in trying to defame Clive Palmer using Kerry Stokes and these media platform. Again, at the height of the pandemic here in Western Australia, Kerry Stokes flew in on a private jet from Aspen, was required to quarantine for 2 weeks, underwent the G2G pass, went to a private function 4 days into his quarantine, jumped on his private jet and flew out on day 6 of his 14-day quarantine. No mention of that. A very little mention from
everybody's equal, but some are more equal than others.
That's and I guess so we can see the comments coming through. We are going to try and pick up some comments on there, but thank you very much. And as I said at the start of the stream, we sort of want to talk about. I'm going to play something that I'd like to get your views on, and then similarly, I've just seen some footage that. You know, we know that there is no borders, there's state lines, but there's definitely a wall, a barrier of even what's happening here in Australia. We can see you have to go looking on certain channels to find what's happening in China, what's happening in Brazil. Mainstream media are talking about, you know, those in Brazil. There's little protest because of the
protests. There's millions.
Millions and millions of people.
Well, that was like the Sunday Times did a 2-page thing on Camp Epic and saying the Epic protest was like 10,000 people. There was almost 1 million people there. I was there for the whole time. It was one of the most incredibly historic moments in Australian history, and they've just tried to whitewash it out, you know.
And so you went to Canberra, as well. Here's a question I'd like to ask because again, it's only those that have got some footage out, and I know that there was independents that were going in there to get footage, and they shut the mobile phone towers down. They were recording on the phones, and there was just a relay of mobile phones.
All the live streams went dead,
Yep, driving
and everybody
out.
lost their
so
stuff.
that I know.
Yeah.
Talk about the long-range acoustic devices. What did you see?
No, there was, they had the LRADs. They had them everywhere. They had about 6 that I saw. They also had them at the minor protests on the tops of four-wheel drives. But the real weapon that was used against us wasn't the LRAD. I was in Coober Pedy when we were doing the tour around, and we did a live from an underground chapel. And there was a guy there, I thought he was from Coober Pedy, but he wasn't. He was a telecom expert, and he...
That's fine.
And he was at Canberra, and he told us they've got some other weapon using through the mobile towers that can irradiate. And because what we had after Camp Epic, I was going around, and everybody was talking about all the people who were blistered. So you're coming up to people who wore tops, pulling down their tops, and huge blisters from sunburn underneath their clothes. My lips were black, just completely black, and a lot of people had really black lips, as black as your top. Yeah. And it was like that for weeks. In fact, we used to joke, Camp Epic, because of the black lips. In the actual camp itself, Camp Epic, there was no rats, no birds, no insects, no mice, nothing. It was really freaky.
Wow.
So we don't know what they were using there. And maybe that was just, because there were so many people, there was food everywhere. There should have been loads of rats. There was none. But on the day I remember it was only a mild day, I got burnt 2 days before the main event, really quickly, like within no time at all. And I was as red as a letterbox. And they reckon they could target this thing. And there was people there. So we don't know. All I believe from what I saw and the footage I took of people is that weapons were used against us, against the Australian people. And the other really, and this is documented, I met I just kept interviewing people because I realised the mainstream media wasn't interested in people. So I wasn't interested in anyone who was there. So I want to know, who are these people? Who are these people that have come from everywhere? Yeah. Why have you come? And I interviewed one man who was originally Hungarian, and he was on this camp, and he was furious, he said, because he'd grown up in communism, and he'd escaped it. He wanted a new life. And he said this morning, this was the Monday after Camp Epic, ABC Radio had put out a call, if you see anyone wearing the Australian flag or having it draped on their car or carrying it, call the police so we can have them arrested or moved on. Wow. So in the national capital, on that day in the national capital, the national flag became the Yellow Star. And that's true. That's history.
It's not the right side of history, but it
happened.
And there was a lot of people in Perth, Western Australia, that were, what do we do? If we go over, they won't get back in.
Yeah, I met these people. They couldn't get back.
Yeah, can't get back in. But I mean, hearing, I trawled through as much footage as I could get, but to get those stories, and I just want to come back to your gesture with the blister. You're saying
it was under the cloud. It was bulbous. Like huge bulbous blisters. I've never seen sunburn like it, and it was under their clothes.
Yeah.
And not just a few, loads. We were going round to the different camps because we got dispersed, and a few days later they're still going, come look at this guy, and he'd pull up his top, and his skin is all peeled away, And they started collating them because there were so many injuries, because there were so many people there. And these were the injuries, and I don't believe that came from the LRAD, which was a sound thing. The funny thing was, on the first day, I don't believe they used it. The cops all put in their earphones, and we're sitting there going, "Holy shit!" But they didn't actually use it. But the next day, we all had the same. So they put in theirs, we put in ours. I was laughing if they actually gave us directions. We were going, "What?" you know, because it was just insane. But they didn't realise no one. It was like they were going, these people are going to storm Parliament, but we weren't there to storm Parliament. We were there to be heard. And they couldn't process that, you know. And, yeah, it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary time.
On that note, for those that in Western Australia and those that have, you know, maybe trying to process what Mike was just saying then, certainly, you know, police armed to the hilt, firing weapons, deploying weapons like the LRAD on Australian citizens. Probably a good time, if we can. Thanks to Michael, we're going to have a look at some inside footage of a day on the streets in Melbourne.
Okay, yeah, this was the morning of the Shrine.
With that really peaked. So bear with us. So Michael's given us this. We're just going to bring this up to you now, and then we'll let you watch that, and then we'll come back and get some comments from Michael.
Stay together! Don't stay together!
Just stop it there. Or even you just go back. Yeah. So this was on the morning of the Shrine, and that vehicle was driving around the city streets. That you can see at the top, at the turret, there's a guy there with a rubber bullet gun. He's just indiscriminately firing at people that they thought were protesters.
Yeah.
And
Clayton,
these
can you
guys,
highlight that with the mouse? So you able to do?
Yeah, there.
Yep.
And these guys leapt off. One of them, you can't see their faces. One of them leapt onto the guy who was running next to me and smashed him into the ground. And I filmed this over my shoulder. And I thought I was going to be slammed down to the ground next, so I prepared for it. But then instead I got shot by a rubber bullet. And this was about 10 in the morning. And it broke my hand. And then I didn't know at the time, it was a boxer later told me that. All I knew is I couldn't use my hand. And then finally the small group that was running away at the start amassed at the end of the street. And we were like, what do we do? What do we do? Because we're not used to this. We're not used to an armoured car in the streets attacking us. So this is the second time that it happened.
Unless somebody's robbing a bank or something.
Yeah,
you know,
we were just wanting freedom.
Yeah.
And so the young people, there was a lot of young people, they did not want to go home. They wanted their freedom. So they said, no, we're marching. So they were determined to meet the bigger group. And we didn't even know if there was a bigger group. And finally they stopped firing at us, and we heard, and there was a live video went out of a young man with his head covered in blood. And the word on the street was that they'd shot someone in the back of the head, which is the way they were shooting, you could see that could happen. And so they backed off. And then we were just wandering around the city. I kept meeting these people. I took videos of them too. All of them injured, you know, shot on the legs. One guy was bleeding from the back of the head. They'd been shot at by the police all morning. And we finally got to Queen Victoria Markets, and someone came out with a loudspeaker, or one of those megaphones, and said, let's go to the Shrine. I remember at the time thinking, where'd you get that from? Because they were jumping on anyone if you walked in. So we often wondered if that was actually a police officer. And then, so Queen Victoria Markets is the furthest from the Shrine you could be in the city. And so we knew it was a long walk, we were already exhausted. And every street we could have turned down to go a different direction was blocked by lines of police or horses or that Bearcat. So the only way open to us was the Shrine. So they didn't stop us. They could have stopped us at any time. They had more resources to stop us. It was more of them than us. And so eventually we reached the Shrine. And then once we got there, we were exhausted and we sat down on the steps. And and then they all got in front of us, this huge mass of all these stormtroopers, and they stopped. And I think what happened was, from a marketing perspective, they're going, hold on, what are we doing? We all look like we're out of a bad version of Star Wars, because we look like the bad guys. And these guys look like they're at the cricket. They're all singing the national anthem and holding up signs of freedom. And I don't think they could figure out how to market it. So they started telling us that if we left around the side, they'd let us go, no fines. But we heard from Sky News that as soon as you went around the corner, they were arresting you. So we knew we were going to get arrested, either here or at home. So I said, well, look, let's get arrested here. Hopefully someone in the world can see it. This is a shrine of freedom. We're not desecrating it, we're just sitting on it. And if they arrest us here, they arrest us here. And they came up, and then they started saying, if you don't leave, we're going to shoot you. But we didn't believe them, because he literally thought, there's no way you're going to shoot us on the shrine. Yeah. We're in Australia. I know you shot us in the morning, but this is the Shrine of Remembrance. You're not going to shoot us dressed like stormtroopers on the Shrine of Remembrance. But they did. And there was a young guy sitting next to me. I can't remember his name offhand. I did interview him later. And he was with two other mates, three young guys. Now, his grandfather's name was on the shrine. Now, he'd come down there not to protest for freedom, but he saw the grandmother get knocked over and pepper sprayed the week before. So he was there, he told me, to protect grandmothers, because he knew there was grandmothers in the march, and there was, from the police. That's why he was there. Now, before they eventually kept coming in incrementally throughout the day. They got really close. We knew it was going to be it was all on. And he was going around with a plastic bag, picking up all the rubbish, cigarette butts, anything. There wasn't much rubbish, but he picked it up because he didn't want to desecrate the shrine because his grandfather was on it. And he put the plastic bag on the side, and then he came next to me, and he sat down before me. And then these guys, in all the masks and all the Tupperware shields, they smashed him up because they didn't arrest us. They, like the ones who I had my arms linked up with two other guys in their 50s, and we thought, oh, they'll go easy on us. They're old guys. Just say, come on, old fella. But instead, the cop that was beating me was smashing my head into the ground with his shield, going, stop making me do this, stop making, 3 times he said it. Then they threw us through the air to someone else, and then they got on our back, and they couldn't breathe. They were just brutal, absolutely brutal. And we didn't know that they were shooting people because we were getting assaulted. And what happened afterwards, after they'd shot at everybody, after they dispersed everyone, they'd taken over after we'd been assaulted and arrested, they had a barbecue at the rear of the shrine, and they were celebrating what they'd done.
Wow.
That's the truth.
I want to come back to one point, and that's the marketing. But before I do that, I'm just going to say, I can just see a comment coming in there, Andy, who's watching the stream all the way in Canada.
Oh, hi.
So,
Andy.
And before I come back to the marketing, because there is a point that I just want to raise there, with Andy just putting that comment, with what you do, Michael.
I can't see the comment in my eyes, so you have to read that.
He's just saying hello from Canada. Keep fighting, power to the people.
Yeah,
so his name's Andy. Does it blow you away that when you're doing a stream like this, we're doing a stream and a comment from miles away?
Yeah, we had it this morning. I was doing an interview with Jerry, and Mexico's up. Hi, I'm here from Mexico. And you're just thinking, wow, it's incredible, So, yeah.
And this is what we've had to resort to in order to get this message out, because it now comes back to what I wanted to talk about, marketing. You said the police didn't know how to market it, and they were telling you to go around the shrine because they've realised that. We certainly didn't see on mainstream media here in WA. We had to go other sources to try and get what's happening and what we could get from streams like yourself. But what they marketed that event was that none of the fact that the police had opened fire with rubber bullets, but they just said people disrespectfully marched on the shrine to anti-vaxxers, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And there's your marketing.
That's right. That's
what-
eventually what they did.
Yeah.
The big thing was they said we urinated, and that they had a big shot of a policeman looking down at this river of urine. And we've got the main picture. It was a horse. It was one of their horses. And if you go down there, you realise it runs towards the shrine, so it wouldn't have been us. And then the other thing too, I mean, it's literally like a river, and every single officer had a camera on him. Plus, they had all these other officers just filming it all. We all had cameras, and yet no one captured this protester who got out his schlong and did the biggest piss in human history. I mean, if he had the balls to do that, he needs a shrine built to him. And no one caught it. Instead, they photoshopped out the horse, which we can prove, and then they said that we urinated on the shrine. Anything to make us look bad. And then they actually called us Nazis. And they're all there in black uniforms and weapons and shields. We're sitting there with jeans and T-shirts and freedom signs, and we're the Nazis. It's insane.
It's hard. I mean, I laugh, but it's so, you know,
Oh,
I
it's
don't know what the
insane.
response is.
And the
you know.
people out there want to, but when we got home, the people going, oh, they should use real bullets. The people are wanting to believe it. And you're thinking, how can you possibly believe this? But they're wanting to believe it. And so we were getting attacked like crazy. But there's a lot of people I've met since who used to work at the shrine, soldiers or veterans who worked at the shrine. They refused to work there anymore. They joined us. They do the marches.
Yeah.
They saw it.
These are like volunteers or...
Yeah, volunteers who volunteered at the shrine were disgusted with the police.
Yeah.
Because the shrine was there, you know, the ghosts of those soldiers would have been sitting with us going this. I really believe that.
And it's certainly the backstory that you've just described. It wasn't by design. You were funnelled to that
Yeah,
point.
that's right.
And it seems that's an oversight by the police in itself.
Yeah, maybe they thought we would desecrate it and they could use that, and they didn't realise we didn't. But the other interesting thing too is now that the public have voted for Daniel Andrews, they've exonerated the police of all wrongdoings. Everything is like, yep, that's okay, we're okay with this, let's have 4 more years, Dan. So basically, it could happen again because they've given the green light to this guy.
Again, you know, to try and process, you know, that in itself, and it's certainly, you know, you talk about the images. The reason why I started doing what I was doing is because I thought the streets of Perth were going to turn like Melbourne.
I think you're on the precipice of doing it.
And I do, and I think you know, in hindsight, I don't know. My personal opinion, I have nothing. There's nothing in mainstream media that corroborates this. This is just me thinking, and this is what this chat's about. It's just a slow chat.
Yeah.
It's a different conversation, and yeah, I think we were at that point. McGowan potentially had the benefit of seeing what worked in Melbourne,
Yeah.
and what didn't work in Melbourne, and whilst that, from the police viewpoint, they're having a barbecue at the back of the shrine saying, "Yee-haw, that worked." I think McGowan, I don't want to say to his credit, because there really shouldn't be any credit that's given, but thank God that he didn't start shooting the grandmothers in the streets of Perth with rubber bullets. And the Bearcat, that with the footage, I'm just Clayton, if we can, just a little bit more footage, just to show Michael at the time just running through the crowd, how hectic and those scenes, if you're able to bring that back up.
Stay together! Dad, stay together!
And see, we've got to remember, we're Australians, we're not used to this, you know? Yeah, that's the man.
Old fella here
then
for
we
me.
you can leave it now, then we go
Walking
to,
and
that's
they're
early
what are
on in
they
the day.
firing on us, aren't they?
This is a little...
But that
We're
bit
using
there,
the
there's
lost
just
word.
before you get to me, there's...
No, that's it. You hear us?
Yeah, because
no.
I tried to
That's
capture
right.
people in the crowd,
They
the
want
young
freedom.
people, old people,
That's it. They want
mothers,
freedom. They want
families.
their young
There was just
lives
people there
back.
who basically...
Not to be
oh, this is more at the night. So we sang the anthem. That young man there in the grey, he's the one that got beaten up.
can see the people urinating.
There's Damien Richardson.
And you can see they're desecrating the shrine.
So we were singing that towards him. And look at him, his whole face hidden, no responsibility. And people said that they were United Nations soldiers, but we did talk to them later. They were Australians. They were Melbourneians, or maybe from Sydney, but they were Australians who somehow felt it was okay to do this to fellow Australians. I actually feel that day was a day where something in Australia was lost, and we have to gain it back. The line was completely crossed. We were sort of, they had all these brutal protests. The one before I was in Richmond, and or a little bit before, that's where the old woman Mary got pepper sprayed.
So we'd know Mary in WA. She's the woman in the red.
Yeah.
Yep.
So she was a big woman. She was like in her 70s. She's Croatian, from Croatia, so she had an accent. And she was wearing the Australian flag like a cape. And I'd seen her earlier on Bridge Street. And I remember thinking, wow, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Because it was like there's police everywhere. It was getting pretty full on. And yet here's all these grandmothers going, no, you're not taking my freedom. And the grandmothers were incredible. And there was loads of them. And then later on when we got home, that was a brutal day as well. Later on, I saw, when I got home, I saw her on TV and I thought, oh my God, I know her. And then they were saying it was a man. I go, no, I met her. I talked to her. That's a woman.
Yeah.
And when I finally met her again at another protest, she was at the back. She didn't like coming in. She was scared. And she didn't want to go, but she did talk to me. She said, I asked her, I said, it's the reason you didn't run away when the police were coming towards you was because you just took it for granted that the Victorian police would not push over or would not hurt an old woman. And she said, yeah, that's exactly. So she took that for granted. And then one pushed her down, sprayed her in the face, and then another even bigger guy sprayed her in the face. And 6 or 7 other cops just walked past her while she was screaming on the ground. And then finally, she said the 7th cop stopped and cleaned her up and restored her faith in humanity. But earlier that day, I'd had a young gay man, very brave man called Robbie. And the only reason he's gay is that there's a lot of people saying the LGBT aren't on our side, but there actually is a lot that are. And he was with the cops trying to say basically love and peace and all that sort of stuff, and they pepper sprayed him. So I was milking his face, and we take milk and pour milk into the people being pepper sprayed. Mm-hmm. And so we spent the day with him until he got his eyesight back. And then I wanted to go home because I was exhausted. But when I was walking down the street, I was just passing all these young people who were blind because they'd been pepper sprayed everywhere. And all these people were pouring milk on their face.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to these 2 young women, and they were nursing home workers from the country. And they come down on the train because they wanted bodily autonomy. They didn't want to take this vaccine, and they didn't want to lose their job. And they're telling me that while I'm pouring milk over their face. And you're just trying to pray. You've been quite emotional because I forget, it's been so much. But you're just going, and they've seen this, and they know this, and Melbourneians know this, and they voted for a tyrant. They've said, yeah.
It's, and you hear that, and you kind of think, I'm going to wake up out of this nightmare.
Yeah.
Because, and you'd also say, if you were sitting around having a barbecue, I mean, how big's the fish that you caught? This big, did this really happen?
Yeah. And the reason I videoed the girls doing it is I felt, and it was important to record it.
Yeah.
So that it didn't get blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
And so somewhere on these hard drives, I have it, and you're just seeing this girl going, I want my freedom, with milk pouring over her face. I just thought...
Can I ask you, Michael, that's all happening. We've just seen the footage. You're running through the streets, and you've got a smile on your face, but that's not the point. People react different ways at different things as they're trying to process this. But as this is still happening, you've got the the awareness to still be asking the questions. If you ask these people today, if I had my time again, would I go back and take the same stand?
I think most of the people I know from Melbourne don't regret the fights that they did. They...
Well, is fight the right word? I mean, fight. When we say fight for freedom, I mean, we as anti-vaxxers, we're at risk of being labelled aggressive because we're using the word fight.
Well, I know, but we were just basically protesting. I mean, I've got to go to court next March because they saying I was the legal gathering. I was saying I was protesting.
Yeah.
And so we were protesting for our... And basically the reason we were, and it was all organic, was if we talked about it online, we got censored. You know, we just couldn't speak about it online. The mainstream media wasn't talking about it. The politicians weren't listening to us. We had no other option open to us than to protest. So we're going down to these protests. Like I remember the first one, we're sneaking into the city and suddenly thinking, what am I here for? And then suddenly I came across a river of people and they just welcomed me in, no mask. They said, welcome, brother. And they're all, and you just started crying with joy because you realised you weren't alone, you weren't mad. Here was all these ordinary people. Most of them, I would say, have never done anything like this before, but they were just together like a band of refugees just trying to escape tyranny. And it was just so overwhelming how lovely it was. And then we went around the corner, and then this hasn't been filmed, and then the police met us with pepper spray, rubber bullets, and gas canisters blowing, and they just, wow, just smashed us. And this was, what I think happened was, they tried violence, and this is why I think, because McGowan owes 4 of those Bearcats, is they realised we can't market it. So I think you're right, going back to what you're saying. I think they've gone, nah, this ain't going to work. It's too hard to make us look like the good guys, because we're bashing up old women, you know?
Yeah, because I've covered, you know, just about every rally over the last 12 months, not all, but, you know, at least 90%.
Yeah.
And there are grandmothers.
Yeah.
And there are young children.
Yeah.
And there are young women. And there are pregnant women.
Yeah.
And there are women with small babies in that crowd.
And old men. You know, we were at Canberra, the first camp we were in, there was an old man in his 70s, they pepper sprayed him, pushed him over, and he was cut up, his head's cut open, we interviewed him. They're brutal.
I spoke to a gentleman, and I think his name's Norm. And I know that he follows Freedom Media and probably perhaps follows Cafe Lockout as well. If I've got the name wrong, I apologise. But Norm, as I remember it, was at a rally in a Gopher.
Oh yeah.
Yep, driving around the rally in the Gopher, and you know, so I went up and I spoke to him, and I just asked him. You said, "What brought you here, you know, today?" And he just said, "You know, that." I've served my nation. I've put my body on the line, and you know, my health, my mobility is not that good anymore. I'm pretty much confined to this, and as long as I've got charge in the battery and I can get in here, I will be coming to every rally, every freedom rally that there is, and that's as I remember Norm.
Yeah.
And they're the sort of people, when you see the scenes that you've just played then, that they can't escape. And the police just seem to be in this mindset. And I find it really interesting that you said that you spoke to the police, and because you know what we get here is UN, a lot of those sort of rumours, and
I think we want to believe that because it's easier to believe that our own people would do this to us, that our own police force would actually oppress the people this much.
Easier to believe they would, or easier to believe
It's easier to believe that they were United Nations people brought in, psychopathic cops, but to actually have, and one of the remarkable things was, I was there when Matt Lawson got shot in the belly.
Yeah.
Now you're supposed to shoot those things at the floor, a rubber bullet, you shoot it at the floor, it bounces up from about 5 meters away. Matt Lawson was about as close as you to the cop, and they shot him in the belly. Matt Lawson still has problems with his spleen. We photographed some of those police officers, and someone got in touch with me and said, "That's my cousin." And he said, he's actually a nice guy. But he right there, and he shot, so they knew it's it's difficult to realise these things happen, but they happened. And being there, seeing it, I remember that day I got pepper sprayed. So I was holding a sign that said Australia, land of the free, as long as you do as you're told. And that protected me from getting pepper sprayed in my eyes. It went in my mouth. Rukshan that's when Rukshan got pepper sprayed as well. So anyway, I was walking down the street, and I got some water, and I was trying to wash this stuff out of my eyes because I'd never been pepper sprayed before. When I reached Elizabeth Street, I was completely blind. My last shot that I'd seen was that the police were coming en masse down Flinders Street, and I was thinking, I've got to get out of here. But I couldn't see. And I'm walking down the street, and I was laughing because I was thinking, it didn't make sense. It was like, you're like a crazy, it's like it's insane. It's like, what's going on? And then suddenly out of the thing, some woman grabbed me and said, you okay? You want some help? And then she took me to the side, and these young people started pouring milk onto my face and cleaning me up. And one young man said, here, your T-shirt's wrecked, have mine. Gave me his T-shirt. And this was the Australian spirit. I thought there's great hope here. We've just had these people oppressing us, and here's this great hope, and it's these young people helping a stranger.
Yeah, wow.
So you had this, it was conflict all the time. There was great tyranny, but there was great courage. It was quite extraordinary. And yet the courage of these people was portrayed through the mainstream media as basically right-wing, racist Nazis. You know, they couldn't see anything good about us. The most remarkable thing I saw, which made me realise we are so lost, my hand was smashed, and people were running everywhere. The Bearcat was there, and I came across a Channel 9, I think it was Channel 9 news reporter, blonde woman, mask on, doing a live, and she was trembling. I watched her hand trembling. I could see her focused on the camera, and the cameraman was just looking at me, and he was crying. And he was just crying. And I was going, film it, please, film it, film it. It's just there, film it. They're shooting their children, film it.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't do it. And I thought, any journalist who had 5% of a journalist's soul would think that's a Pulitzer Prize winning shot. I'm going to turn the camera, and I'm going to have this armoured car shooting Australians. That's his history, and they wouldn't do it. And then I realised then, they're not after the truth. Even under this great fear, they weren't after the truth. And I realised then, that's probably when I started really thinking I have to do this, because the mainstream media aren't going to report it.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. Just, Clayton, I'm just going to duck quickly behind just to see there must be a connection there, but we are still going live. I'm just going to reconnect this just to see. Yeah, it's just flicking off and on in terms of the program out. So and I can see the just don't you just love the joys of tech?
Well, it's all learning. This is it. Because like you didn't mean to do this, I didn't mean to. This is we're all learning.
Absolutely.
What's interesting though is Channel 10 is going under. Because Go Woke, Go Broke, people out there aren't believing it.
Yep.
And yet people were managing to do something, because all we're trying to do is show some truth. That's it. You know?
And I guess it comes back to those watching live streams, watching stuff like this, the content. I'm going to sort of dive into, I want to play you something, but before I do that, when you're just saying, yeah, we are learning, and I wouldn't have thought that I would have been doing this, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And I made the comment as we were trying to sort out a few tech issues, that some people, Facebook, you just hit go and boom, away you go.
Yeah.
But to do a stream like this, there's a lot of moving pieces behind the scene.
Yeah.
There's cables and stuff everywhere. And in terms of time, I mean, I honestly say, compared to my previous paid job, that I've never worked harder, worked more hours.
I get up in the morning and I've still got videos from today to do after this.
Yeah.
So I've got about 5 interviews I did today that have to go up. They take time. You have to encode them, live stream them up, put them up. Then I make podcasts out of them. so it goes to a podcast channel, and they go everywhere. So this is my life. So, and this is what I'm saying moving forward. People saying, "Oh, you're asking for donations." Hey, I donate my life to this. I'm literally 24/7. It's very rare that I even have time off. And so if you want to watch it, if you're enjoying what you're watching it, no one will advertise with us because they're scared of guilt by association.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep us going, donate. We don't make millions of dollars, but we make enough just to keep going. Put some fuel in the bus or the truck or something, and we just keep going and doing it. And it's a compulsion to do now. I feel I just decided this is what I'm going to do. If people stop donating, if people stop watching, I'll stop. And at the moment, that hasn't happened. And my part of it, I just felt that our country is being slowly, or actually not even slowly, enslaved. And one of the great enslavers is silence. And so one of the greatest liberators then is free speech and to speak and to talk. And so that's what I tell people, talk, and I'll record you and see what happens. And and you're getting harder to find people who will, and you can see in their fears that they're thinking I shouldn't do it, but then they feel fantastic after they've done it, like, I've stood up. And so for my part, that's what I focus on now, rather than trying to get news items, even though we talk about it. I'm very interested in just spreading the voice of Australians.
And I think there's in WA we've got a number of independents. What we're calling independents, and there's certainly there is a gap that's been created in the market, because even doesn't matter which side you're aligned politically, they can see that they're not being told and not fed the truth. Those people, and we've got Richie from Max Freedom, we've got Scotty from Scorpion Media, we've got Andrew from the Bellman Report, we've got Alan, Silver here.
Courage is the Cure.
Yeah, Robin from Courage and the Cure. Those who we've all been there. We've all sort of started, and I remember that when I hit 100 subscribers on YouTube, and and I don't do, it's never monetized, and when I say that, I've never claimed the monetization. It's not there for that.
No.
Just recently we've done the same thing. We've asked for some donations. We just ask people, if you enjoy the stream, just donate $1. That's all we're asking.
Yeah.
$1. And if 1,000 people watch the stream and those 1,000 donated $1, I mean, that would keep us going for a long time. Not making money out of it. These were the previous mics. There were $1,000 for 4 mics here. They were just not cutting it.
Yeah.
Now we've had to go to these, these, so that we can try and get a stream. That's really not what I want to talk about. But what I want to say is, and I imagine you've done the same as well. I've done a lot of interviews with people, a lot, and I've I might have been there 4 or 5 hours. And then they say at the end of it, you know what? I don't want this to go public. But but I'm not unhappy with that, because to me that's kind of it's out there.
Yeah,
it's a healing process for them. Yeah. So, I mean, what's your experience?
Now I've only had that once, because I tell people from the beginning, where do you want it?
Yeah.
A video, audio. Or do you want to write something for me, and I'll post, anonymously write something.
Yeah.
So I'm very clear from the beginning. The saddest one was we were in Rainbow Beach, and we had a Russian woman who'd left Russia like 30 years ago, and she came here so she could speak freely. And she came and did this great interview where she spoke all about that and the importance of it. And then the next day she freaked out, was calling us, going, "You never told me you were going to put it anywhere." I'm thinking, well, we did actually. And she wanted it down, but she was freaked out. So whether family and her told her to put it down. But that was it. Apart from that, the rest stay up. People were pretty adamant. And see, we do it. What I realized was, I don't have, even especially when we're touring, we don't have the ability to spend hours editing for everyone.
Yeah, it's a massive body. Editing takes a tremendous amount of time.
So what I do is I have a beginning and end, like little templates that I set up, and then I just dump the interview in it. And I don't even try to edit the interviews really. I just dump them in and I just put them up. And then, so to more, they're like historical records. This is this person's voice, we're not editing it, this is what they thought. And I just go. So I think the record was 15 I did in one day.
Wow.
In Mandurah. And because there were so many people coming up. And then other times, if there's a lot of people, I'd actually do it like this, and I'd set up, and we'd circulate people in. So if we were together in a town, you'd go get someone to talk to, and I'd be interviewing someone for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd walk off, and you'd bring them in. And that's what we were doing, me and Damien, and doing 2-3 hour shows where we'd go through tons of people who were just lining up. And as more people watching people talk, they do it. I remember the first time we decided, I said, let's go to a country town, just do it live, see if anyone turns up. We went to Bunbury. Not Bunbury, went to Bendigo. And we set up on this main square, and at first no one was there, and Damien went to get something to eat. And suddenly I looked up, and hundreds of people turned up.
Wow.
And when he came back, I said, we're live, man. We were going to do an hour show, we did 3 hours, and people just wanted to talk. And then we guys go into country towns like that, Shepparton, Wodonga, it wasn't a Warragul, and it was just, this was pre-epic. And then you just realised Australians weren't happy. There was definitely two tribes. There was the tribe that was going with the government, but there was this other tribe that wasn't happy. And they just didn't know what to do about it, because everyone who should be defending them, the media, their doctors, minor politicians, legal community, everyone was abandoning them, telling them they were crazy. Yep. And so that's the whole...
local cafe owner.
Yeah, they were getting banned. People were getting banned from op shops. Like, that was in Bendigo. People were getting banned from op shops by people they'd grown up with. They couldn't get them in.
Wow.
And it was extraordinary. And they were finding solace in each other. And so these strangers who had been outcast by, suddenly they were lepers, and it happened really quickly. And that was the other interesting thing. It was how quickly people relish segregating their brothers and sisters.
And turned.
They loved it.
Yeah.
They cast family members. Koshi goes about, what about the family members who aren't vaccinated? What you going to do at Christmas? And these people
Nearly
said,
this time last year.
yeah, you can't come. You can't come to the Christmas. Devastating families. A huge attack on love. They're doing the same this year. I've got people who said I'm still not allowed to go. But Koshi got away with it. What he did was pure evil. This is Christmas.
Yeah, and you mentioned Channel 10, for example, go woke and go broke, and Channel 10 have announced that their Christmas staff party has been cancelled.
Yeah.
And,
I hope you go under.
Yeah.
I hope you do. I feel...
And make no apologies for that.
No, I think if they'd had a balanced, I remember one of the first things I was thinking, why isn't the ABC doing debates? They're taking away our freedom. Why don't we have a debate on this in Q&A? Why aren't we having a debate somewhere? Should we do this? Or a plebiscite or something? Why is everyone just doing it?
I mean, for many years now, Q&A hasn't been balanced. It's
No.
staged, and it's your questions get audited and vetted and 24 hours in advance and so on and so forth.
Look at that young guy they kicked off. Stan Grant kicked him off the show. Remember, he made a comment about Russians being ordinary people too?
Yeah.
They would have known that question was coming. They would have vetted it. They would have known. And if you watch the footage, Stan Grant at first isn't offended, and then suddenly he kicks him out. So I think he gets a call. This is off the scale, crazy propaganda bullshit. And the ABC has basically betrayed the people. They're supposed to represent all the people, and they've just...
Well, they're funded by the people.
Yeah, they're funded by the people. They're supposed to be there for the people. But they've just... I feel that they've totally betrayed us. And in Melbourne, ABC Radio, the ratings are down by 50% or more. So people aren't watching, or are not listening in. Yeah.
And I certainly say, I know, it takes a lot of hours when I do edit, and I put stuff and I research the stories and put it out, and I'm trying to sort of, I take it. Everybody has their own style, and that's the thing that's great. That's the thing. We've seen. Nico from Hanglish Recluse at the last rally when we had John Shipton, Julian Assange's dad in Perth. And it got a little bit heated there with Nico and I know that it's nothing that he hasn't already said, but his style is not my style, but I like his style, if that makes sense. And I just see that then he's gone and followed the police horses, doing one massive big crap in the pavement in Perth, and just, and he's creating just this image and saying, if you were walking your dog down the street and just left the crap on the footpath, we know what had happened, and it's now, is that mainstream media newsworthy? Well, Channel 9, 10, 7, ABC are never going to run with that. But is it newsworthy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. I think at the moment I'm very forgiving of us because we're making up as we go along.
Yeah.
Most of us never expected to be here.
Yeah.
I
True.
was happy doing what I was doing. I was more than happy. I did not expect this to happen. And the people who are doing it from Melbourne that I know are the same. These are people that basically they had other lives, other dreams. It's all gone. Now they do this. Apart from people like, say, Topher. Look at Rukshan. Rukshan was just a wedding photographer.
Yeah.
Now he's one of the preeminent independent journalists. And because he's using all his great video skills to shoot stuff. But he tells me now he doesn't like going to the rallies because when he does, he wants to do record it, but instead he just gets swamped like Jesus with everyone telling him they love him. So he gets, but he's a great man. I've met him. He's a lovely man and he's a real fighter, but he's a gentle. But I'm meeting people everywhere. Like here in York, you've got a woman called Monique who used to be just a disability worker. Now she's taking on her council and trying to mend the divide in her community, doing great things, and she's achieving stuff. So it's like destiny has come along and people are rising up to just being plucked out of the thing. What are you going to do? You've been tested. And here you are. I never expected to be travelling around Australia, recording people's stories.
But would you change anything? Would you do
No. I actually feel, I was in a Topolini's there the other night. They got doing a speech. And I said, I had my dream and I was achieving my dream. I was really happy. And then COVID took it away. And yet what it did was set me free. Where now I know myself, I'm very comfortable with myself, I'm committed to what I'm doing, and they can't beat me now. I'm never going to take that shit. I'm never going to do it. And they're going to have to arrest me to stop me because I'm just going to keep doing this until the public says stop doing it, Michael.
Yeah, and your thinking you're not Robinson Crusoe in that. You're not alone in that. It's just that with that, you now find yourself doing this. And I must say, there's a lot of things you say that strikes a chord with me as well. And at the rallies, and I'm sort of trying to think of how I can generate conversations as I'm moving through the crowds, and I sort of get that message, and people coming up and just saying, thank you for what you're doing, and that sort of thing. And I mean, I didn't start this to get that recognition. No. I don't want to be at the front of the camera. No. I just wanted to be behind the camera capturing the events. That was really where I came from, and just one thing led to another. I had a good mate, I've known him for 30 years. We started this together, and then he realised, shit, I got to get out of Australia, and he's got family back in Thailand, so he legged it, and went there. But I must say, the one thing though is the fuel that fills my tank is when people say, that story you did, or when I heard that, thank you for bringing that to us. And I never will stop, living to hear that. Yeah. Which brings me up to, I want to play you a piece. There's, and I just sort of want to get some comments from you. I've been thinking about, say, over the past 12 months, what piece had the most impact to me, or what piece had the most impact to the audience, or those that have watched it. And I've sort of broken it down. I've narrowed it down to two things. And we've just recently had the 1st of December, we've had a massive protest rally up at Parliament House with all the construction workers when they were mandated. But leading back to that, for me, it was the nurses when they were laying their uniforms down at Dumas House, and I posted that particular piece on the anniversary day. Now that probably had the most impact on me, and I get the emotion, you know, when you say the emotion, and if I was to watch that now, and when I edit that, you know, I've got a lump the size of a tennis ball in the back of my throat. It's hard
These are
stuff.
nurses. It's a pandemic, and these are nurses, and you're turning them into villains.
And it's, you know, and I sort of, you know, for me sometimes at the rally, and people say, "Oh, did you hear when they said this?" And I'll kind of go, "Well, no, I'm sorry, I didn't," and because I'm just focused on that. But when I sit down and edit it, and then all of a sudden the words just come back, and the whole, you know, it can be looking through the lens of a camera, and I'm seeing, but I'm not seeing. It's not until I'm sitting down and going in, out, cut, paste on an edit that I actually really see, and it hits. So where I'm coming to, Michael, is the thing that I think had not only, I guess, the most impact to me, but the most impact to those that I brought the story to, and that's a story of a family that reached out. Her name was Jackie, and her husband, her loving husband, of Harley. And Harley was touted by mainstream media, pushed by Mark McGowan, as being the second person in Western Australia that had died of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So you've
I know of this, yep.
Okay. So Clayton, if you wouldn't mind, I'd just get you to bring up that piece. I'm not sure.
Jackie, I'm going to now invite Jackie up. Jackie is the loving partner of Harley of 32 years.
I think that if there's any mainstream media here today, I'd say shame on you. Shame on you. You should get your facts right, and you should come to the source. My husband died on the 10th. On the 11th, the next day, my stepson rang me and he said, "Jackie, have you shared with the media about what happened to Dad?" I said, "Have you watched it on TV?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, they're saying that Dad died of COVID." So he tried to ring the McGowan, and we had no response from him at all. So, you know, mainstream media, if you're out there, you're meant to give the truth. We're a nation and a people, we want the truth. And if you're actually, you should be ashamed. My story is one, yes, we are sad. I'm weak at the moment and we're grieving. I grieve with all of you out there who know what my circumstance is like. I had COVID, I was at home, I could not go to the hospital. None of our family could go to the hospital and be with Harley in his last moments. I had asked the hospital, if he is not getting better, could I please come in, or I'll send him home to us. They did none of those things. My husband was in hospital after 3 days. He said to me, "Look, I've just heard that I have got a clot." And they did not tell him in hospital that he had a clot. And that's when there was a bit of despair in his voice. He said, "I don't think I'm coming home." He said to me, "I rue the day I had the vax. You're looking for an answer. And you're hoping that out there that they're reporting the truth. But there's no truth today. There's no truth with the media out there today. We have to search for our own truth." Listen, I tried to hide this from my daughter, but because I knew we'd been talking about getting vaxxed, we both thought, no, we really didn't want to, but maybe this is maybe. but sadly it wasn't, and it gave him clotting, which they never told us about, till he overheard the nursing staff say that he had clotting. I mean, that is just disgusting. Now, the showering, a man who was a shower a day, two showers a day, a man who didn't feel like the day started without having a shower. I fought with them. I rang them up and I said, my husband would like a shower. He said that night staff wouldn't give him a shower. No, they said it's not a priority. Not a priority was their thing. The other thing he complained to me was, he said, I'm hungry. Now, they know because of his condition,
Clayton,
that he
would you
wasn't
just
breathing
be able
very
to
well.
take
So he would have
the Cat 6
sausage
into
when he was in
the
hospital.
HDMI
I said,
splitter
have
to
you
the
asked? He
TV?
said, yes, I've asked
see-
and asked for sausage, and they haven't given it to me. You know, I have lots of questions, and I go to bed thinking about if what maybes. And I have come to this conclusion. If you have a loved one, do not take them to the hospital at the moment. Do not take them to the hospital, and especially if you think that they may have COVID, because I'm telling you what, I think they simply did not administer the right treatment for him. Basically, he was there and they were allowing him just to die without giving him what he needed.
So I'm just going to bring Michael up to speed there because, so the audio was coming in, the in-ear monitors only pushing out the left side, the music was on the left, that's why we're hearing that, and Jackie was speaking on the right, so that I didn't actually realise that until another tech issue to take forward. But essentially, Michael, so there was a couple of things there that, firstly, Mark McGowan said that he was not vaccinated when he was.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So, and then in talking to Jackie, when she first started talking to me, and I said, okay, well, that's a big claim to make. Not that I doubted that, but you certainly want to make sure with the story that there is, the credibility's there. And helped her go through the steps to get the copy of the vaccination record. Now, you would think at the time of the vaccination campaign back then that the WA Public Health would have a record of that. So that was lie number one. And the other issue that Jackie's talking about is when Harley was in hospital, he overheard the nurses saying that they don't think that he's going to make it.
Oh my Lord.
He's got a blood clot in his heart.
Oh my God.
Right. So we have. So that's where, and that's why she's talking about. In there, she talks about Jala, her daughter, who was standing alongside her, saying to Jala that she hadn't actually told Jala that she went and got a jab herself. Now, Jackie was sick at home with COVID, and even though she had the jab, and she was still sick with COVID, and then she was waiting for a number of days to test negative before she could go in to see Harley. And that was, day 3 that he'd been in hospital. I think, day 3.5 is unfortunately when he passed. Harley was devastated when he heard that news, and he knew that there was something that they weren't telling him, and that's what he was conveying back to her. He was talking about they weren't giving him a shower. He was asking for food and they're not giving him food. And all of this, and then unfortunately Harley passes, and then Mark McGowan comes out and says Western Australia has just recorded its second death. This is in an 11-month period, mind you. This is when he stood up at press conferences saying that tens of thousands of Western Australians, 10 months earlier, are going to die because of COVID. And of course, when those numbers didn't come there, they come up with this. Now, Jackie and her family made extensive efforts to contact Mark McGowan's office and talk to him to say, you need to set this record straight. And of course, no.
Yeah.
So, that was, I guess, one of the first rallies where It started to happen, but you have a shift of people coming forward saying that and Jackie says this, I thought that this was the only way out, and I went and got the COVID, the vaccine, and so did Harley. And it's interesting because, Harley, he never told Jackie that he'd got it until it was too late, and he woke up in the middle of the night saying, there's something not right here. You need to get me to the hospital. So that's the background with the audio. In terms of that, and I think for me, for those, it doesn't matter where you sit in relation to whether you were pro mandate or anti mandate. Just the care in the public health system, number one, on the lack thereof, and the way that the media painted that story when they just needed to make a few basic checks to find out and establish that he had been vaccinated. And it was just the propaganda machine kicking in.
Yeah, they were desperate to get this. What's really interesting too is that even if the public heard, they looked the other way. So where we are now, that I see, is people say the truth will set us free. I think there's a lot of people out there that are trying to hold on to their house, their holidays, their kids in good schools. And the truth they see is going to make them lose all this. So they don't want the truth. They realise the government's lying. They realise the media's lying. But they'll propagate it. They'll spread it around to try hold on to their piece of dirt. And I think eventually what will happen, because I have a theory now like that everyone says Camp Epic, all the big marches you guys had here came to nothing. I actually think what they actually were was a shot across the bow. You make us too hungry, you take too much, you go too far, we'll rise up, even Australians. And the next time we rise, this is the wolves, this is the braver ones that rose up. And we did extraordinary things. Camp Epic, Canberra, the biggest marches here. You push us too far and we'll be back. And you ain't stopping us next time. And so I got a belief that, and I base it on the fact that I've talked to pharmacists, I'm good mates with a few pharmacists now, the third and fourth jab, they're not taking them. They're throwing them out because no one's taking them. They've had the initial group, but the rest they're not taking it. So I think, even though everything looks normal on the surface, I think there's an undercurrent. The tide is turning, but it's like an undercurrent. But people are trying to figure out how do we get out of this without any form of conflict. So they're just hedging their bets and waiting now. So I feel that we're almost like a volcano waiting to explode. And it's just this thin veneer of everything's back to normal, everything's free, but it's just there. And that's why I think they're not pushing the third and fourth or fifth jab.
And it's interesting you say that. There's a couple of things I sort of think. One in particular is I've noticed, and whether you've got the same experience the same as well, but say with YouTube, we found there was, if we had a certain speaker, bang, strike.
Oh yeah, gone.
Certain word, bang.
4 channels I've had taken down like that.
And certainly, I got things going, and then I lost the first one, which was Freedom Media Perth, and that's hence the reason why I've got Freedom Media WA, and I'm always sort of worried about that. But I've found in the past 3 or 4 months that the censorship on YouTube has eased off, and I sort of think, well, why would that be? And just think, did they actually were more people starting to get alarm bells and thinking, we are pushing them too hard here. We don't want too many people to wake up this quickly.
That's right.
Because, I for one, the COVID vaccine was, and COVID for me was never the story. It was always the agenda being much deeper about the New World Government, One World Government, and now the shift into digital ID and digital identity. And I think the conversations some people are having. Are we having enough? Absolutely not.
No.
And if we've seen the scenes of what you've brought to us today and what I've seen in the streets of Perth, that's going to impact a person regardless if they're vaccinated or not.
Yeah, that's exactly
and
right.
I find, I find this is quite interesting. The other night, I went along to see Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Oh, you did, yeah.
Yeah, and he, he talks about this, and he had a Q&A session, and one of the questions the first question, in fact, that was asked of him was, why did he have the reaction with Qantas playing the Welcome to Country on the plane? And and I think, I saw at that event, I saw what most people would see Jordan Peterson in some of his videos that he's well known for. And he starts off, and it all gets down to just saying, if you think that major companies like Coles, Woolworths and things like that, and he even names some of those, so he's aware of what they are in Australia. You're going along, you're tapping, you're buying, and if you think that it's a good thing that they're going to send you a monthly summation of your your carbon footprint, then you really need to change your thinking. I will just say with Qantas, the biggest point that he had with that, and he's in terms of, and he used the comparison that they have the same thing in Canada, and they talk about their First Nation people and what they've done over here, and then he uses this as a comparison. And his reply was, he just thinks, if you've taken the country from First Nation people, then give it back. That's his position.
Yeah.
And he went on to say, and he said, just let me explain this, because by you giving this message of a welcome to country is the government's way, via the sponsored media, of saying, well, we have taken your country from you. We know that it's not right. We're not going to give it back, but we're going to say this because it makes us feel good. Yeah,
I've been saying that around in the theatre, because we had to say it for theatre. And I said, it's like me going, hey, this is Lindsay's remote. Lindsay, I want you to know this is your remote. It's a good remote. I'm not going to give it back to you, but I want you to know it's your remote.
Yeah.
It's racism. It's like going F you.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
And
I've talked to Indigenous leaders, and they agree.
Yeah.
They hate it.
Yeah. And we have we had Greg Martin, an activist who spoke 2 weeks ago now at the rally, and who's talking about this in the Voice to Parliament and things like that. And so, Jordan Peterson also went on to say, one of the other things that he truly, the reason why he spoke out is to say that I paid to be on that plane, and you have me captive. I can't go anywhere on that plane, and what gives you the right to push a propaganda onto me when the message, as you've just said, you've been talking about it for a while, it's wrong. They've taken the land and it's just wrong. And he ended it by saying that marketing carries weight and more people need to stand up. And that's what's going to make the change. So I found that quite interesting. And I guess we've also just recently, we had Pauline Hanson come over, and she had a discussion at Topolini's where you were Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And, with Jody from Topolini, who's coming up to, what the government and what McGowan has done for Jody, who has a family restaurant, an Italian family restaurant, employed a lot of people, had a lot of extremely good risk protocols in place to combat COVID, and was just heavily targeted for trading because herself, as the owner, was unvaccinated, and she was prevented from being in her business.
Yeah.
And hence we know that at the end of January she's about to have her final hearing for that. And we're seeing across Australia now, we're seeing just in New South Wales the other day, thousands and thousands and thousands of fines withdrawn because they didn't have the legal framework, it wasn't good rule of law, and so on and so forth. But Pauline Hanson spoke at Topolini's about the Voice to Parliament, and some people there weren't quite happy with what Pauline said, and so on and so forth. I want to ask you this, Michael, because I have got a piece that I want to play, and there's another piece I know Clayton just mentioned. We're still going okay on battery?
Yeah, 29%.
Okay. So the voice to Parliament, the referendum question. Do you think that it's the right referendum question?
I'm unaware of the referendum. Sorry.
Okay, so they're pushing for a Well, the question the question actually hasn't officially been tabled yet, so that's potentially why you're not aware, I would say. So the voice to Parliament is pushing. They are going to push. Albanese is going hell bent for leather to hold a referendum. The last one we had, or the plebiscite on legalising gay marriage, came at a cost of $125 million at a state when, at a time when the economy, nobody, the government don't want to say the R word, the recession word. Yeah. We're well and truly leading into the federal election. It was nearly $1 trillion debt, and it's well in excess of that now. So, but they're going to go ahead with it. So I've always taken the viewpoint of, well, we have a federal minister for Indigenous Affairs. Where's her voice for the people? And where's her representation? But if I suggested to you that, we are the only democracy in the Western society that doesn't have a Bill of Rights.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I think they come up with reasons why they won't give us one, but I don't believe any of them. I don't think they want to give it to us because they know how powerful it is, and they know that we'd use it, and we're easier to control without it, and so that's why I don't think we'll ever get one unless we get it by force,
And I think if the referendum's going forward, and again, this, you can take out whatever your viewpoint is on the mandates or not. It doesn't matter. If you're vaccinated and you're in control of a shop and there's a COVID declaration here in Western Australia, you're going to be impacted the same way.
So what's in the referendum? What's the actual question?
Well, there hasn't been structured yet, but they want to give a voice to First Nation people. Yeah. And formulate a right. And there's many things around that. I was talking to Clayton.
Like what, they want to have them in the Constitution? That's because I know that's what the Indigenous
write some of it into the Constitution. Yeah. But and you could look at it and go, well, that's only a percentage of the Australian population. And I say that with no disrespect.
No.
It's.
Well, this might get me in trouble, but I'd say it'll probably fail. Most referendums fail. It's like 3/4 have failed through history. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, and so let's take that. Let's take that exactly. So the question is, rather than looking at the voice to Parliament, and historically it says that the referendum will fail and it will come at great expense. I think, was it 1977, the last formal referendum we had here in Australia? But as I say, an example of the referendum, and it was going to be a referendum, but they ended up having like a conscious vote on gay rights. Tremendous amount of money to be spent. What if I sort of put out this proposition? Albanese is going to do it. We're going to a referendum over this voice to Parliament. People take this opportunity to put pressures on their federal members of Parliament to write in the second question to introduce a Bill of Rights. Because if we had not had this Bill of Rights in place, what the government has done to all people would not have been experienced in the past 2 years. Right? They wouldn't have done it. So I'm just going to play a piece now. A little bit of history. 2001, they tried to introduce an Australian Bill of Rights. 2017, Andrew Wilkie. So here we go here. We'll just see if...
Bill of Rights Bill 2019.
And I call the member for Clark.
Good morning, Speaker. I present the Australian Bill of Rights Bill 2019 and the explanatory memorandum.
First reading, a bill for
you still got it in that
relating
channel?
to the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all Australians and all people in Australia and for related purposes.
And I call the member for Clark.
Speaker, I move that this bill be now read a second time. Speaker, this bill would enshrine the fundamental rights of all Australians in Australian law. It's modelled closely on the Australian Bill of Rights 2001, introduced by the then member for Caldwell, and it's very similar to the Australian Bill of Rights 2017,
yeah, it's
which I
working.
introduced. In essence, The bill would render invalid any Commonwealth, state or territory law that's inconsistent with the Bill of Rights to the extent of that inconsistency. It would also specify that Commonwealth, state and territory laws should be interpreted so as to be consistent with the Bill of Rights. The bill allows for the Australian Human Rights Commission to inquire into any act or practice done by the Commonwealth or a state or territory government that may infringe on a right or freedom in the Bill of Rights. It also allows for people to make complaints to the Commission if they believe that an act or practice infringes a rights or freedom outlined in this bill. The bill would also give effect to a number of international agreements to which Australia is a signatory, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. Speaker, the importance of this bill is self-evident. We are the only democratic nation without any sort of bill or charter of rights. What domestic legislation we do have is scarce and far too narrow. Indeed, there are only 5 relevant acts in this country that attempt to protect human rights. That's the Human Rights Commission Act, which is really just about regulating the Commission, the Racial Discrimination Act, the Sex Discrimination Act, the Age Discrimination Act and the Disability Discrimination Act. Yes, Speaker, the government is intending to add to this flimsy framework by introducing a religious discrimination bill. But perversely, such an act would in fact further restrict human rights in this country, which begs the question, why introduce a piece of legislation that promotes special rights for particular groups of people rather than supporting a piece of legislation that will promote the rights of all Australians? The only effective way to protect the rights of all Australians is to establish a single, strong and reliable framework as described in my bill today. The bottom line is that we still need a national Bill of Rights that protects and promotes unalienable human rights, such as the right to health care, the right to housing, the right to education and the right to equal treatment within society. And the attacks on press freedom and the unprecedented difficulties in accessing fundamental services such as housing and health care. None of this should be happening in Australia, and it only does so because we don't have an overarching framework to protect our rights. Surely it's unthinkable that in a supposedly free and democratic country like Australia, the government's police force is raiding media organisations and trying to suppress freedom of the press. That demonstrates why Article 4 of this Bill of Rights is important, to enshrine a right to freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Speaker, we also need a Bill of Rights because of the appalling way Indigenous people are treated in this country. Now, I don't need to list all of the statistics about things like incarceration rates because we've heard them all before. But it's patently obvious that many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aren't being afforded their basic human rights. Article 10 of this bill, though, would specifically enshrine the rights of Indigenous peoples, as well as many other sections of the bill, that would help improve the lives of Indigenous Australians. And Speaker, what about the atrociously high rates of homelessness in this country? Article 23 of this bill would enshrine a right to an adequate standard of living, including clothing and housing. In closing, I would just like to say that when I first tabled this bill in 2017, the response from the community was overwhelmingly positive. Some people couldn't believe we didn't already have a Bill of Rights. Others knew that it was about time to introduce one. But despite all of that, neither the government nor the opposition supported the bill in what was another striking example of their failure to represent the community. So today, Speaker, I urge both the Liberal and Labor parties to reconsider their stubborn opposition and to wake up and to realise that we need to stop lagging behind the rest of the world and to stop allowing our rights and freedoms to be eroded.
Yeah, fantastic.
So that, so you got the audio on that? That was all good on that.
Fantastic.
On that incident.
Yeah,
So
I fully agree.
I just going to set out a bit of a timeline because I've had a look at this, and most people back in 2017, in fact back in 2001, when he mentioned that he first raised this, well, not him, it was first raised back in 2001. But Andrew Wilkie, independent for Tasmania, who's no longer sitting in the Parliament, 2017 he introduced the Australian Bill of Rights. That's what it was called. to have that enshrined into the Constitution. That was knocked back. 2019, in fact, that was the 16th of September 2019 when he rose, went through the first, second reading, and he'd done a lot of work in there and introduced a lot of things. And I've had a look at that, and you talk about, as we said at the beginning of the stream, the way forward, and it's it's a spiritual connection, it's a community connection, and it's and that's one part of what you're looking at, and I'm sort of looking at a view of trying to wake people up politically to say that our government is aware of this, and if anybody of any side, pro-mandate, anti-mandate, whatever, but if they listened to that and couldn't see the merits of a Bill of Rights, then I don't know. So, have we arrived at the time when we really should be putting pressure on our federal members of parliament to say, if you're going to hold a referendum at the taxpayer's expense, then we want a second question, and the question is,
that's a really
should
good point.
Australia have a Bill of Rights?
Yeah.
Because you can go back and have a look at that particular Bill of Rights. You can see, the exemptions from civil and criminal liability. That it provides you, as well as another range of articles that he's mentioned a couple, and well and truly caters for our First Nation people.
Yeah.
To give them, if you take that particular article that he refers to, and that's your voice to Parliament, then I'd be very, very surprised that those that certainly are pushing for it from the First Nation people, does it meet the objectives? Yes, it does. Well and truly meets that, and more. Housing, and the like. So that's my take on things. We're just mindful of battery power there. I'm just going to pick up on one comment there. We were talking about Leigh, I think it is, saying that where she worked at, they were offering $100 bonus to employees to get the second jab. And the conversation points at work were people were going around with excitement, she says here, amongst the team saying, have you got your $100 yet? I mean, we've heard of deals like, they were offering, they first started to offer beer.
Yeah, and then there was iPads.
Right.
They were offering iPads to children and to the Indigenous.
Yeah.
We've all heard these stories. They were determined to get this stuff into us. But the Bill of Rights, I think most Australians were stunned when all this started happening that we didn't have one. I think a lot of people actually thought that we did.
Yeah.
And we thought we had freedom of speech was enshrined in the Constitution. We found out it wasn't.
No.
And so suddenly we were like, what? Because basically it was implied. And that's how we'd lived, with everyone, living up to that. And now suddenly the government said, no, it's implied, we don't have to live up to it.
And what I did want to say there is 16th of September 2019 is when that came in for the first reading. A week later it came up for the second reading, and you heard that there. And the end of that video, I've edited that down, but they ran short of time. They took it off the notice paper. It then came back up in 2020. What month do you reckon?
March
the 24th, and it was voted down.
Wow, that's like 10 days after March the 14th is when they closed all the theatres.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and I say it again, had that Bill of Rights been in place, then none of what the government did would have happened. So I, for one, my awakening and my way forward is to push for that politically.
Yeah.
Yours is a community, a spiritual.
Yeah.
And
I would back that. I mean, through talking about this is something to bring up. Absolutely, you could spread it as we're going around Australia and get people talking. So that's definitely one way forward. We literally have to take our country back and enshrine some freedoms that they're incorruptible. There's another thing I've been asking people, especially I feel at the moment, the biggest thing we have to do as the freedom movement is we have to get. We tell other people to wake up. I feel that we have to wake up and we have to get really ruthless with ourselves. Like, say, in Victoria, I saw the Freedom Parties using the same tactics they used in the federal election. They lost then. And to me, we haven't, if an airplane falls out of the sky, the experts rip it apart trying to find out why it crashed. We didn't do that with the federal election. I went around the country, there was all these people fighting like crazy, or just really trying to get in, doing everything, call flutes, family, everything, touring. I met people touring the whole of WA. In hotels, I interviewed political candidates. Nothing. Literally none of them got in. Adrian from Port Hedland, you thought he'd be a ringer to get in.
Yep.
And so, great guy. So to me, I think, why didn't we get in? What exactly went wrong? And so that if we do go to another election, we've learned from the lessons of that. But then I saw in the Dan Andrews election, they didn't do that. They just went and did the same old thing, expecting a different result, and they got exactly the same result. And I feel that, because a lot of people have been saying that, I bring this up a lot, they say, oh, the other side are asleep, we've got to wake them up. I actually think they are awake. I think they've just made different decisions from us. They've looked at the same, like the perfect example was that woman I interviewed the other day. She's had 4 jabs. She likes Mark McGowan. She thinks he's a great listener, really decent, nice guy. And I'm just sitting there listening and think, this is really good for us to hear, because these are the people that are going to vote him back in. That's what they think of him. Other people in the freedom movement they see him as a tyrant. So this is, what is it in someone like Dan Andrews, the people that vote for him, what is he selling to them that they want to buy? Because I can't see it. I just see a tyrant.
No, I can't see it either. And I think, that I'd like to pose the question to that woman that you interviewed. If she was a cafe owner, a small business owner, that doesn't have 50 employees but has 8 employees.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if she doesn't even have 1 employee, but just a hard-working mum and dad. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But a small business that's doing their bit in society, in the community, being for jab, she still had to shut her business down.
Yeah. I think the toughest...
How can she be okay with just that part of it, though?
Well, one of the amazing things she said was, and the Max Freedom guys were talking about this today, is that she actually said, but he's not in charge, someone's pulling his strings. And I said, well, who? She goes, oh, I don't know.
Wow.
But she doesn't want to take the 5th jab.
Yeah.
So she was sort of, and she hasn't had any bad reaction to the 4th, but for some reason she doesn't want to take the 5th. But I feel it's really refreshing to hear these people. Another thing I hear people say a lot, well, I haven't had any adverse reaction, so it's like, F you, I'm okay. And my thing is that we can't build a society on if I'm okay, I don't give a crap about anyone else.
No.
We can't do that. And we have huge amounts of people with adverse reactions, and they're being silenced. They go to hospital, and the doctors won't even listen to them. They're dying, and the doctors are saying, oh, no, it can't be that. They've got turbo cancer. I've met so many people who know so. I mean, basically, the cancer was in remission, now it's come back, and within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they're dead. It just rips through them. And it's just been silenced. No one's talking about it. The media's going, oh, it's long COVID. It's not long COVID. There's something seriously wrong here.
Yeah. As Gerard Rennick said, Senator Gerard Rennick says, the signals are there. The government's just, choosing to...
It's not just the government. Like, see, I was in Tasmania, and we're going around Tasmania to finish the first tour, and we meet, and someone says, oh, look, here's a funeral director who wants to talk. The funeral director has, for the last 14 years, or 13, 14 years, he buries 2 people a week in Launceston, and that's it. 2, maybe 3. Now he's burying 7. And the people that have just died in their sleep in their 50s, before it was all 80-year-olds expired from, say, some suicides, now they're just dropping dead. And that's just one funeral director. There's 5 in Launceston, 4 or 5, so it must be all going through. And I'm contacting the local newspaper why aren't you doing a story about this?
From 2 to 7.
I'm not even from Tasmania. I just happen to be passing through. I'm in a pub and I talk to this guy. I do his message. The United States, this thing in one day, this thing had like 360,000 views. It was going insane all over America. And you guys in Launceston, these are your people, and you're not talking about it. That I got taken to Traralgon. We're going to country towns. People were taking me to the cemeteries, and going, look at all those crosses. These are only the ones they buried, you know. And the people in the towns, the people who are talking, the crematoriums, they're going, we can't keep up. There's so many deaths. Even when I was in Ceduna, I met 2 funeral directors from Perth who went to Epic, who couldn't get back to Perth. And the coroner was calling them, because they were unvaccinated, the coroner was calling them saying, you need to open up. We've got more bodies than we know. The morgue's full, we don't have any. This was months ago. And the media's not talking about it. I mean, it's worse than betrayal. It's like treason. It's almost on the par of treason. You have a job as a journalist. This is why we're doing it, because they're not. To hold the government to account.
Yeah, it's you put out unbiased, impartial information.
There you go.
And you let people make informed decisions based on that.
That's it. That's why you know Jerry, the journalist who's Jerry Roberts. I interviewed him last night. We put it up this morning.
And you're interviewing him tomorrow?
No, I interviewed him yesterday, and I put his interview up this morning.
Right.
And everyone's raving about it because he's a journalist speaking like a journalist should.
Yeah.
And he's going of the prostitution of journalists out there. And I just can't understand how they can live with themselves. How they can just get up in the morning and do their job, like here they are, the news presenter, I'm doing my job. No, you're not doing your job. Your brothers and sisters are dying. They're injured. There's something seriously wrong, and you're just ignoring it.
It's and you remind me back in the early days. You know, I was up at Parliament House every day. There'd be 20 nurses there. There'd be nurses with bubs hanging off their hips. You know, as we see, and running from one side of Parliament House to the other to try and just voice their displeasure to Mark McGowan. The mandates hadn't quite kicked in then yet for the nurses. It was coming, but it wasn't. But they could see what was coming, and they knew this was happening. The reason I'm saying this is we have in Perth, we have Jeff Parry from Seven Media, and Jeff Parry up there. They had one of the ABC radio presenters that was pro mandate, and had done a number of tweets and so on and so forth, and then all of a suddenly passes away.
Oh, yeah.
Now, nobody had actually said that he's died as an adverse reaction of the vaccine. Certainly up at Parliament House that day, the only person that was putting that forward was Jeff Parry.
Wow.
And he was egging the people on. And there's a stream out there that's done that, and a person... it's amazing, and you would have the same thing, Michael, that, I've had family and friends that I've lost, but I've met family and friends, and these nurses, you can go through and just say, I'm not going to say their name just out of respect in case they don't want that name said, but I now know these people by their names, their first names, and I know some of their life stories, and, and it's quite rewarding to do that, but so Jeff Parry's doing backwards and forwards and going, you have no right to say that. He suggested nobody was saying that. That came from him. And it was quite interesting because it would be chucking it down. And we'd all be huddled underneath umbrellas, and I had people holding umbrellas over my camera, and Jeff Parry would go to the front of the parliamentary entrance, and he'd be standing under the cover and smirking and carrying on. And then you had Cheyenne, who's spoken at a couple of the rallies, and she comes out with this with this piece, and it's talking about Darren Hitchcock, I think it is, and so you're talking 60 Minutes reporter, you're talking global stories, you're talking big profile, and he has suffered a vaccine injury. And quite a serious. He's on lifelong medication, so he has probably the more severe version of myocarditis or pericarditis, where he needs to have lifelong medication to control the inflammation of his heart. And he'd gone out to try and talk to his colleagues to get this story out and said, look, I willingly took it because it's part of, I need to be able to travel the world to get these stories. If it wasn't for that, I didn't want to. But now that I have, this is what the result is. And my own colleagues are turning their backs on me. And Jeff Parry was there, and then Cheyenne grabs this article and she reads it out, word to Jeff Parry, and you just see the smirk on his face just change instantly. Where he's saying, look, this is, there's alarm bells going off with this vaccine. So and as you said earlier, it's how quickly people turn. And I just want to come back to one thing that you say, with the messaging that we have, this lady that's saying, okay, yep, she thinks Mark McGowan is a hero and so on and so forth. But how can the fabric of society be satisfied when mainstream media are telling us, if you see your neighbour walking out to the letterbox, don't wave to them, don't yell out and say hi to them, because the fear of COVID is in the air and airborne, and these stupid comments. If you see the football come from, AFL, if it's kicked into the crowd, then duck, don't touch the ball, and they're wiping the goalpost down and all this sort of stuff, it's just, it's crazy. But I mean, it's not all doom and gloom, and there is a pathway forward. What the silver bullet is, I don't know. Hopefully, we're just conduits. That's how I see it. We're just a conduit to try and bring this here. I'm going to bring up the video that this is at a protest rally in Melbourne.
Can I just say before that with the nurses though?
Yeah.
I still am not used to the fact that I meet nurses everywhere, like even on the Nullarbor. Some people come up, they look at the truck this time and they talk, and they're nurses or social workers, and they lost their jobs. They worked through the pandemic, and then they've been villainised and they got thrown out for gross misconduct. And now they're just drifting around. They're painting houses, they're cleaning, they're working on cattle stations. These are nurses.
Yeah.
And then we've got our health.
And we're screaming
for nurses, and we're basically saying, if you want to look after us, you've got to take this thing that we all know now doesn't do anything except injure you maybe. And I never get used to it. I never get used to it. You still tear up when you hear their stories.
Yeah.
Nurses go, I can't give the vaccine out to any more people. I just can't do it. So they've thrown away their dreams to be it. And it's just it's even like, I met a boy in one town, a young man, he pushed trolleys. He's on the spectrum, so he pushed trolleys, and he won't take it. And so now he's lost his job. Now he's at home, and he was helping support his parents, and they're all really struggling. And the society's going, no, take this thing and you can get your job back. Pushing trolleys. It's just absolute bastardry almost, that I don't understand how. I still struggle with how we got here. I still struggle with Anzac Day, how I was on there that day. I don't know if you were there. I was there that day.
Yeah. We went up and did dawn service.
There was people behind where the umbrella people were doing it. Because they were building the stage for Kim Beazley. So we were doing the morning service. They were smashing these things down. I watched them on purpose to disrupt. And then I turned to them, because I was trying to be impartial, but I said, sing the national anthem. Or the dawn, it's the last post. Fucking stop. You're Australian. And most of them did, except you had one guy looking around, and then he realised he was alone, he got cowed and he walked off. But you're like going, you almost got to a point, I hate to say this, is like there's a huge group of Australians, I'm going to say this out, you're going to hate it, that are assholes wrapped in a virtue signalling smile. And they don't care about your freedom. They don't care about their own freedom. They don't care they have no integrity. There's no real morality. They just want an easy life.
You're not talking about politicians.
No, I'm talking about Australians, but I'm meeting them. They're out there. They enjoy subjugating their fellow Australians. They enjoy it. I've seen the people that became CHO officers. They relished it. I had one on my back for ages, until he realised he'd screwed up. He was he was coming back to my house when my kids were there, bullying my kids to give him my number and other things like this. And then he found out that he'd screwed up. But he was relishing bullying. It was almost like it going, oh, I'm not allowed to bully, all these anti-bullying things. Now they said, you can bully, great, I really want to be a bastard. And there's other people out there that I've met them. We've seen them at the rally spitting on us, throwing things at us, and then calling us, you know, the crazy ones. And I think that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a level of decency, and out there at some point, you know, we're even to say that this was the most remarkable moment. I was at they had me at a meeting, and there was some priests there, and I went up to this priest afterwards. I said, why don't you come on the show and talk? Because I knew who I was. I said, you know, there were 75 priests in Australia wrote a letter to the bishops saying you can't force people to get vaccinations. And the archbishops all over Australia refused to have it. They said, if you post that, we'll derobe you. So the priests didn't know what to do with this letter. They published it on this one website that hardly anyone saw it, and then they reached out to me, because I just turned up at churches. I wanted to interview priests. Why aren't you opening the churches? Anyway, so I published it in detail, and this beautiful letter. Anyway, I meet these priests, and I'm saying, come on my show and talk. Oh no, you know, we could get, you know, dethroned or derobed. I'm going, we've all lost our jobs. And our whole Christian civilization is based on a man who was crucified for the truth. And you're his living representative on the planet.
Yes.
And you're scared you're going to get thrown out of your nice little cushy job. If you won't stand up and speak, why should anyone else? The souls of Australia are in hazard. People are confused and lost. It's your job to suffer for us. You've had it easy for now, but now is the time for you to suffer, and you're not doing it. What are you? And the people around them were like, oh, stop picking on the priest. But I wasn't angry, but I was thinking, this is the truth, man.
Yeah.
What are you? You think just wearing a little collar makes you the spiritual leader of the people? You know, we're in this incredible time where the people like yourself, like Lee from the I meet these great heroes that I'm trying to document, who have risen out of nowhere. No one's heard of them before this. And if we lose, probably no one will ever hear about them. But if we win, there will. People might still talking about Lee from the Umbrella People, or this Monique, or in Melbourne we have Topher and these others that Rukshan. You know, there might be a statue to Rukshan would not be denigrated, but a statue to Dan Andrews, you don't have to worry about pigeons shitting on it. There's going to be loads. You know what I mean? But that's the bullshit. But Rukshan there's no one in the media that has the love of the people like Rukshan. No one. This is where we are. It's this incredible time of folk heroes and a real spiritual battle going on. And the battle's in each of us. And I really tell people at the thing, inside you there's a compass that points to what's right and what's wrong. And at the moment the government, Big Pharma, is trying to direct you into the wrong direction. And because you're trying to hold on to things that you think are important, you're going that way. But the reason you're getting so frustrated and angry and confused is because you know you're heading in the wrong direction. I was never that religious before this. I don't know how religious I am now, but I am spiritual, and I see the rise in spirituality rising, and freedom, free speech, all these things fundamentally to the path to God in a way. I know that sounds strange. To me, if God is anything, He's truth. That's it. And that's Jordan Peterson. I love how he says, just speak the truth. Every time you speak the truth, you lean a little bit towards the light and towards heaven. So that's what I do. It's that simple. And I just feel that that's where we are. We're on the right path. We're a long way from home. I don't know if we'll reach it in our lifetime. But at the moment in Australia, there is a massive battle between what's right and what's wrong. And unfortunately, at the moment, the people who are on the path to what's right are in the minority. That's the...
which is a sad indictment.
Which is absolutely heartbreaking.
It truly is. And you mentioned, you may have been aware, we had a couple of significant things here in WA, and you're talking, and I reached out to the Archbishop Tim Costello here to get comment from him, because
yes, so we do ours.
Quite a large at St Mary's Cathedral in the city. He opened up St Mary's Cathedral on the first day of the vaccination for children, for the campaign. They opened up...
Is this where they had it underneath?
They had it underneath. So, and not only that, Michael, you had a group of people that went out to the front of the church and to pray the rosary, not for themselves, not for their families. They actually prayed the rosary for the church, because the church was being used as a weapon for a jab clinic for the kids.
Yeah.
And the church... These are people that it's their church.
I know that laugh, man.
It's, they threatened to have them arrested for praying outside.
A cathedral.
And they couldn't quite cross the church, couldn't quite cross the threshold. And actually, they called the police. The police were called. And it came to, a negotiation, and I would suggest perhaps led by the church, which was surprising in itself, because if it was anywhere outside of the church, the police would have came in and just arrested. No doubts about that in my mind. But the police came there and negotiated to say, please don't pray out in public, otherwise we're going to have to arrest you. Come inside the church and pray the rosary for the church inside the church. Close the doors, nobody knows what's going on. That's number one. Number two is we had St Bernadette's parish here in Wembley, and you may have heard about this, where the police came in and started checking for mask exemptions.
I've actually seen video of it.
Yeah, and I know a lot of this story, and I know because I mean whatever level your spiritual connection is, but a lot of what you see here, Michael, that you mentioned nurses and social workers, that they do paint, because I can tell you that wall right there was painted by nurses and social workers who volunteered. The building of that there, the cladding of the gyprocking of that was done by a group of people who said, what can we do to help you get this message out? This backdrop here was built by a man who was in St Bernadette's that day that the police came in there, and what the police minister here in WA put out in his media statement was just utter bullshit. It was the biggest lie out. The police didn't come in and wait for the sermon to finish. They just came straight into it.
Yeah.
Checking for mask exemptions.
Yeah.
And as you say, it doesn't matter.
And I talked to Eastern Bloc countries. I had a Polish friend I was travelling with.
Yeah.
But other people from the Eastern Bloc told me the communists never did that. The communists would never enter a church while the church was on.
Sacrilege.
That was sacrilege.
They didn't.
This
cross
is the
that
communists.
threshold. Yeah.
And yet here in WA, we're doing things.
Yeah.
In Dan Andrews wouldn't let the Jews go into the synagogue.
Yeah.
And they were locked out of the synagogues. They were saying this has never happened before since the war, and it's incredible.
There's things I've had a person in here who probably needs to think about the names here. A man of Muslim faith, and the insights that he was telling me within the Muslim community here in Perth as well is it's not discriminating. They're not discriminating against the religion, as you say. It doesn't have to just be Christianity.
No,
it's all faiths, and the destruction and the division that they're trying to create within that. So
it's Marxism.
Absolutely, it really is.
And it's even, you see great debates. Like I was in Adelaide, and a Muslim in the hijab, everything in the proper, and she came up and she said, "I'm not allowed to hug men, but I'm going to hug you."
Wow.
Because she said, "You're keeping me sane."
Yeah.
She had a son there, and it was beautiful. And you have this thing of just trying to keep sane. And I think one of our jobs is not only to tell the truth, but it's to let people out there know you're not insane. That you're not insane. There's something really wrong here, and we're not going to sell the lie. We might not know what the truth is, but we're going to call out the bullshit as we see it. And it's all bullshit. That's why Cafe Lockdown's thing is pro-choice, anti-bullshit. That's our motto. But that's how we've been. I mean, I don't know if it's a lie, but CBS had a thing, Elon Musk threatens free speech by allowing people to speak freely.
Hang on a minute.
He's going, what? And this is one of the powers that we have, that it's literally our weapon that the mainstream media can't do, because they literally can't really speak the truth. Look at what they're doing with China in the white paper. They're trying to support the protesters, but they can't go too much because they've attacked our protests.
And that is an interesting one, and there have been a number of independents that have done pieces on that as well, and I've seen a couple of RV Minis tweets from Rebel News.
Yeah, they're great. He just tells it like it is.
Yeah,
he's great.
And just straight into it and just sort of see, But again, the woman that thinks Martin McGowan is a saviour, would she be aware of what's happening in China?
I don't know.
I mean, people
asked her
were
about
jumping out of building windows.
I know.
Because they've welded the buildings closed. 20%. Okay, so that's just on the. They're jumping out of the. And I read, and when I say read, it's backed up with some footage as well. So how credible? I don't know. Will you find it on mainstream media? No. Do you have to go digging for it? Yes. That they locked people in a particular province in China. They welded the doors shut in a high-rise building. Of course, we know that there was a fire in one particular building, and people were jumping out to try and escape. But they weren't taking food in. People were starving. Family members were passing away. They weren't coming to take the bodies away. And a week later, people just thought the only way out is to smash the window and jump out of a 10-story building. And that's happening in China 2 weeks ago, and nothing's said about that.
Yeah.
Yet 4 days ago or 2 days ago, we're now saying, good on those people in China that are taking a stance, But as you say, why are they taking the stance?
That's right. I mean, look at the Canadian truckers.
Yeah.
And what Trudeau did to them with the banking. Jacinta Ardern with the things they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
The euthanasia bill in Canada, which is just, from March, a 12-year-old can go and get euthanized without parents' approval. With Ardern and Dan Andrews have full-term abortions where the fetus is not given any pain relief. This is evil shit. And you talk to people, you can't find anyone who goes, yeah, I think that's a good idea. They go, this is, and yet it's all going through. The government is just ignoring the people. They're ignoring the people. I don't believe the masses are wanting what's happening, and they're just ignoring, they're rolling out this thing.
Oh, I don't think so either. I'd certainly, I hope that they don't want what's happening. The question is that, are they actually in tune with what's happening? I mean, how many people would have known that Andrew Wilkie, with that passage, was trying to introduce the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, absolutely. That's like something I've never heard. And then wrapped all of this, we have this Bonneville and Klaus Schwab, that they all go and listen to him, and you're thinking, who is this man? We never voted for him. Why are you even listening to him? Why are we being forced to listen to his speeches? Who is he? And his father was a Nazi. And he's going, am I insane?
And you must know, people must know, surely, they must know. They're not asking for much, but Senator Alex Antic raised a petition in Parliament just asking for Australian parliamentarians representing those that vote for them. Now that's think about that, because that's really what happens. To make a declaration, are they a member or a graduate like Yep, of the World Economic Forum.
There's lots.
And that was voted down.
Yeah.
It was voted down.
Wow.
Why? And you'd have to ask yourself, there's something seriously wrong. And you mentioned Victoria, and I've seen the passage of legislation that the Victorian Dan Andrews has empowered the Education Department that if the school deems the student to be mature enough to understand what's going on, and we're talking about gender transition, a mature minor person. Now, if that legislation and the light's coming here, and interestingly enough, Jordan Peterson spoke about that on Wednesday night as well, and just saying, stop confusing the kids.
Absolutely.
Just stop it. And these conversations around understanding the medications behind puberty blockers is the same medication that is used in chemical castration, and it's irreversible. And it's, I mean...
that laugh, I get it. You're just frustrating because you just want to go, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? This is, we're finding this, what are you doing?
And even now, I'm hesitating to expand further on that, because I know that people have had streams and strikes for saying this stuff.
We had it. We brought this up, and the stream was like up to 400 and going up, and then suddenly went down to 0. It actually cut the live stream.
Yeah.
Which is, these are all, and the thing is, it's so easy to stop. The good majority of people who are good people who just have to stand up and go, no. I think when we were around Tasmania, and some of these, like Esperance is another one, you go in these tiny little towns and there's cameras everywhere. You don't need these cameras. We're on this tiny little Tasmanian town, and next to the docks where you got these old men bringing in their dinghies, or they've been fishing, there's like 8 cameras watching facial recognition, watching everything. You don't need this.
Well, and you saw that, we covered the nurses' pay dispute, and I told you that just before we started the stream. And, when you're sort of talking of unity, I certainly like to think that those within the freedom movement would understand the reasons why we covered that. And, I guess, we can't help others see what's coming if they don't want to be part of unity themselves. So I think it's important that, I'll cop the comment. I won't censor that. We have a couple of algorithms in place to catch things like threats and stuff like that. No, there's zero tolerance for that. But if you want to put a piece out there, and those that are saying, where were the nurses standing for those that, that didn't want to subscribe to the mandates, back then? Well, I don't know. I don't know if they've been at the rally. And unless you categorically know that they haven't been at those rallies, and I personally, I feel you shouldn't make comment. Don't shoot from the hips. And those that kind of, that commented on the stream and sort of pulling to pieces that, okay, fine, yep, you've had your say, and that's fine. Those comments are still there. People can read those. But you missed the point. And you missed the point that I said at the head of the stream and the end of the stream. We covered this event for 2 reasons. Because McGowan has made the strike unlawful for the nurses. But then the day before at midday, the Industrial Relations Commissioner here in Western Australia, and McGowan's denying the influence from his government, but it's there. We know it's there. We just can't join the dots, because he's preventing us from joining the dots. But why else would the Industrial Relations Commission, normally Labor governments are pro-union, and they're now, they came out and said that bus charter operators, taxi drivers, Uber drivers, or any person that conveyed a nurse to that unlawful protest a week ago at Parliament, if we can identify you, we're going to issue you with a sanction. Now, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter where you are, where you think the nurses, those that stayed in the health system, for whatever reason, set that aside. People should have been up in Parliament for that very reason alone And so, how far do you take this?
Yeah.
We used a public bus to drive or to get to the rally. We used the train. Do you give the bus driver a ticket now?
Give
We're
the
using
train
the
driver a
public
ticket.
footpaths. Do you give the count? I mean, how far does it go?
Yeah.
You know, so set aside that. I get it. I get that people are thinking if more stood up, but you know, if the freedom movement had participated in that rally in the same numbers that they generally do, imagine the message that McGowan would have got then.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so that only starts with unity.
Yeah.
So there's water under the bridge. I get it.
Yeah, me too.
But
Yeah.
we have to, our mindset needs to change.
Yeah.
And there's anger. And I get the no amnesty. Yeah, there will be no amnesty.
No,
Don't
no,
worry
no.
about that. I'm not
No,
advocating
no.
for
It's like I interviewed a young guy the other day. He's double jabbed now. He's trying to be a part of the freedom movement because he doesn't want
Yeah.
any more. But he feels discriminated about us. And I watched the comments, and a lot of people saying, no, that's fine. But some others are attacking, going, yeah, you know. And I'm saying, no, we can't do that. Whatever these reasons, we need their numbers. We need to come back together.
Yeah.
Well, if you took it, it doesn't matter. We need to come back together and be a greater force to stop this.
Yeah.
There's no other way. We can't do it by ourselves.
We had, and I'm just going to just give you this insight as well, just on that particular rally, because off camera, you know, I had, and it goes both ways, right? It definitely goes both ways. So I'm not saying, you know, those comments there, I think I told you before the stream, it's nearly 700 comments. It's, it's probably over 1,000 by now. It's over, you know, nearly 700 shares. I mean, it was a big stream, you know, big stream for that particular event. You know, and I'm sure that there's nurses, you know, that have been in the health system for some time, have looked at that, and great, thank you, welcome, and you know, stay and hear some of this. You know, we were getting heckling. The team, you know, were getting heckled, saying they're the anti-vax media, anti-vax media. And you know, I was talking to one because one interesting thing, which I didn't know. But the union have been. I've known this. Sorry, I'll say this. I've known for some time because I used to work in the healthcare system, right? So I know that nurses, the nurses union, have been advocating for patient ratios for
A
years.
long time, yeah,
years.
Years.
What I didn't know, and I was talking to this person, this midwife, who was giving some great insight that mum plus bub doesn't equal 2 patients.
Oh, wow.
It's 1 patient.
Yeah.
And she was saying commonly on her ward they average 6 births a night.
Yeah.
That's 12 patients.
Yeah.
But the staffing, there's no ratios, and they're asking for 1 in 4.
Yeah.
But they have 6. And that doesn't take into account if bub needs neonate special care.
Yeah.
If mum's had a cesarean, even just a cesarean that she requires, you know, that's a massive procedure.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know, it's not. You know,
No, it is.
I've had the first-hand experience.
Yeah, me
you know,
too.
and
Yeah.
and I don't.
Not myself, but
I don't want to share too much.
My
you
first
know,
child was a cesarean.
Yeah, my second.
Yeah.
And it was an emergency.
Yeah.
And I remember my then wife was on 2 trolleys.
Yeah, it was a major
It was on
thing.
her body was on one trolley and her insides were on another, and that's probably that's incredibly graphic. But tell me how anybody could be happy with saying that mum and the bub in a traumatic birth, that the nurses are having to fight to have additional staff to take care of those 2 patients. So that's point number 1 that I wanted to say. So
Plus, isn't your premier giving like $1 million properties to rich people on the foreshore? This is what we're hearing. So there's a lot of money around.
Well, I mean, Western Australia, he touts that, you know, this is the most successful economy in Australia.
Yeah,
So
Dan Andrews says the same.
He's got the money.
Yeah.
You know, Dan Andrews has records levels of debt.
Yeah, I know.
And we're only just, you know, potentially, we're still not hearing McGowan talk about this, but we know, you know, the homeless in the city, and you probably may have seen that this morning. It's just, you know, at record numbers.
And the suicide rates is quite much higher too than I've heard.
It looks like, are we getting the one? So we did receive some heckling, that's fine. I was going to take on one of the person, as in asked in the comment, but I think she realised the message I was trying to get out. But Janet Ray, who heads that union, she made a point of actually giving us an interview at the end, at the expense of mainstream media, because they've crucified her. And now, for your information, Michael, if you're not aware, is that they've now taken a move. They're looking to deregister the nurses' union.
Yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah, so that's where that's at. I know that we're running low on battery, and I kind of want to, I've talked about trying to help wake people up on a political sense. You've talked about the spiritual sense. We both have that understanding. And a scene that you have in Melbourne, I think it would be...
Okay, to finish on this, so once they allowed us to protest, it was very nervous because we'd been brutalised, and we were in St Kilda, and we weren't allowed to eat in the cafe, so we were picnicking on the street, on this mall street, while people were sitting in the restaurants watching us. That was the protest. It was really strange. Anyway, this a man in about his 30s, a very slight man, started walking with me. He'd never heard of Cafe Lockdown, he didn't know me. We just started talking. And he just wanted to protest. He was from the Ukraine. He didn't want what was coming. He felt real tyranny was coming. But he said, I want to do something, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, what do you do? He goes, I'm a violinist. We didn't know he was one of Australia's best violinists. And I said, well, why don't you write the Australian anthem like it's got a broken heart? Like we're playing it in a camp and no one's allowed to sing. And I never thought he'd do it. And he said, yeah, I can do that. And about an hour and a half later, he sent me a phone when he said, listen to this. And I was like, oh my Lord. And then we got to the protest and I said, well, I had to do a speech. I did my speech. And then I said, tell people, I said, look, how about we do this as a protest? This young man's going to play the national anthem and we don't sing it because it's a lie. So we listen to it, but we refuse to sing the words until it's not a lie. And he got up and I told everyone to be silent, and I held the microphone to his violin and he did this. And it's still, can it play?
So we're just going to bring you that now.
His name's Markin.
Got audio?
Yeah. I might have to shoot to the toilet. Don't put too much water.
So I'm just going to hold the fort a little bit, and Michael's just going to check the batteries on his easy monitor. You might have got that on his
Is there a toilet up here?
What's the microphone?
Yep.
Oh, here we go. I'll just thank you, Clayton, for letting me know. I'm just saying there, Mike is muted. Thank you.
That's what I said.
Just bear in mind, Michael.
Your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucky I didn't rub one out.
I'm just trying to see, we're seeing all the laughing emojis there. But as I was saying, but I'd muted my mic when I went back just to change my in-ear monitor. But there we go. That's the beauty about a live stream, because it's real. That's actually interesting. That's something that Janet Ray,
that's a first.
that she actually liked about doing the interview at the Nurses Rally because we're live streaming, because she's not going to get edited out.
That's
right.
That's
something that I asked her, and she certainly highlighted that. And I asked her for her explanation, what goes on behind some of these mainstream media press conferences. And, she preps and she issues a media statement, and she'd speak for 10, 15 minutes, which is a lot to talk, in terms of talking on point about the information. And yet they'll go and put an 8-second grab on the news and take it totally out of context. So the live stream, you've just seen one of the other things of live streaming there.
Live streaming of a live stream.
What I was saying with the mic is I apologise that we've been trying to bring you some of the comments as well, maybe more than we should have. But one of the monitors, both every now and then, they're flicking off and on. They're making it a little bit hard for us to read. But this was a slow chat. And I headed it up, as I say there, to chat about nothing, but we're going to talk about everything.
Yeah.
And I certainly hope, I hope that you're leaving to head back home Monday?
Monday morning, yeah. Heading to South Australia. So I'm going to be in a town called Laura. I'm going to be there for about a week, and then make my way back to Victoria from there. I'm just thinking I'm going to, I've got a bus decked out now. I'm just going to keep going town to town and just let people speak and see what happens. I think that's something I can do.
So certainly safe travels. That's what we can say. It's a different. I do want to ask you this. You at the head of the stream, you talked about coming over the state line. That experience. What was it like this time?
Nothing at all. Just went straight. Well, we were in the road train, or the semi, so they stopped to check the contents of the truck. But me, no, nothing. I've had nothing at all. It's just coming across. I mean, we had mask mandates in South Australia. We literally got kicked out of. We couldn't go shopping anywhere. They'd be throwing us out of the store constantly. The South Australians were masked Nazis, and we refused. We were in a convoy. We just refused to wear them. So often we were sometimes going hungry because we couldn't get food. That was our famous thing when we were on the road to Ceduna. We stopped at a guy called not Ceduna. Coober Pedy. We stopped at a guy called Spuds Roadhouse. I'll just finish with this.
The comment from Sharon, can you just keep that one there? I'm going to come back to that one.
So we went into Spuds Roadhouse in the middle of the night, like 1 o'clock in the morning. It's like 200 k's either side. There's nothing there. You've got to get fuel there. We filled up the little truck and we go in and the guy goes, "Wear your mask!" He just yells it out across the thing. I said, "Oh, don't wear them, mate." And he's going, it's like shocked. He goes, "It's South Australia. It's the law." I'm going, "Oh, well, arrest me." And I give him the money. And then I went to buy milk. "Do you want to let me buy milk?" And this is what I love about the freedom movement. So he wouldn't let us buy milk. My friend Kret, the Polish guy, comes in. He kicks him out because we won't wear masks. So we're in this truck in the middle of the night driving to Coober Pedy. And I said to my friend Kret, because we hadn't eaten, I said, "Well, we've got muesli and beer." And so,
5 food groups, right?
So we took a mouthful of muesli and then we slugged it down with beer. It was actually delicious. And we just did a live, we just laughed, forgot about it. From then on, whenever we got to towns, people brought us muesli and beer as gifts. Or we'd turn up and they'd have T-shirts, muesli and beer, breakfast of champions. And it was just, this is what it was. It was really beautiful. So that man's bigotry, that man's fear, actually made us laugh, and we made something of it. You know what I mean? The people themselves. So it was, it's there's a beauty to what's happening at the same time that there's an ugliness, and they're sort of together. So even though you see ugly things like you've pointed out, I find great hope in our brothers and sisters who are fighting, you know.
Yeah, and you know, those that, I mean, they don't have to do what we do, and it takes a lot of, like I've said, there's a lot of moving pieces to what we do to do this, but you can still, grab your phone, you can go out there and do things. And there's many examples commenting on a stream like this. And I'm just going to try, when the monitor comes back up, just pick up this one here. Sharon's just saying, that nothing they can do will ever take away her vibration, her energy, that she will keep fighting this battle daily. And she does have a vax-injured partner. She's talking about that in her comment there. So I guess, sorry to hear that, Sharon, but I guess your partner seems well and truly in good hands in terms of, the emotional support that you can offer, because it certainly seems that the healthcare system is not giving them the medical support that your partner needs. And that it's good to hear that people.
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing at the fact that I live stream while you're
well, we were
reluctant to drink this glass of water in case you want a sequel.
And I just sort of wish with your story there, when you're talking about muesli and beer, and that at the very peak of the mask mandates here in WA, or the directions, because they weren't mandates, they were directions. McGowan's only just moved to mandates now, if we have this COVID, a COVID lockdown, or COVID declaration, so that we have the lockdown. But I needed a part for one of our Wi-Fi antennas for a stream. And to me, that part, I mean, it was, it was $5. It was $4.95. It was nothing. And I had to get it from Autronics in Joondalup. And of course I went in there. Now, I don't normally talk about this, because my personal medical information is mine and yours is yours. I have a mask exemption. It's a lawful mask exemption written by a doctor, but I don't use it as a trump card, because I'd like to think that people could understand that, here's the reasons. And there's ways and means of trying to do that. So I went into that particular store to get this part, and of course, no mask, get out. So I could stand at the threshold of the store and just say to him, here's the part that I need another one of these. Can you please bring it to me? Here's my card, pay for it, and do that. They wouldn't do it. I did a quick, a quick stream on that. And I just put all the details out there. And I guess my muesli and beer is that I said to people, Google review. I need this part to do what I'm doing to help bring those that can't get to rallies, those in rural areas, and so on and so forth. So, I expected a couple people, might jump on there. And, well, more than a couple people jumped on there. And I must say, I mean, I'm not.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I was really pissed. I was absolutely pissed. Right? So much so that I went back. I went down to Bunnings and I bought a full-piece COVID suit, and I got a goggles, and I got a proper respirator, the whole lot. And back then, I mean, Scotty from Scorpion Media, and I rang him and I said, mate, I'm going back, and I'm going to go get this part. I'm going into the shop with
Scotty
the mask.
would love that.
And so Scotty had the camera. He was standing at the door filming this, and I walked in there, and I just, because one of the things I was saying to him is that the way that you're discriminating, there's people, that you don't know what the reason I have the medical exemption for is. And as, that your diligence as a community member, as a person in a shop that's refusing entry, for this, when I'm offering you a safe alternate, I can stand at your door and there's nothing you can do about it without the mask. I'm offering you an alternate. You don't want to engage in that sense. But then I went in there with that, and he didn't like that, and he wouldn't serve me again. So I went over and above a little pissant bloody mask. And but when I went back, the phone was ringing off the hook. And people just got the number and started. But there you go. That's my my dealing usually. So
that shows there's a great, not so power to that, but it shows how angry people are and how willing people are to react. You know what I mean? There's we've had so many people we've interviewed that have had great support once we've done it. People struggling, and they've just had great support coming from the interviews. There's good people out there still.
Yeah,
lots of them.
And that part for the antenna could have been food that an elderly person or somebody with a mental health disorder, well and truly, and it's not their fault. They're trying to do their best, and the way that person was treated in that condition could be the difference of life or death for that person. And to be able to just dismiss it in that manner, I just think is completely appalling. And that's I didn't put the second part out. Maybe I should. Every now and then I say that I will.
Well, to tell you with the mask, just before I left Melbourne, there was an incident that made me realise, wow, the tide's really turning. I had to get some money out from the bank. The first night, I had to wait 24 hours I had to book in to get it out because they said they didn't have it in the bank. Anyway, I'm in there and there's a person my age next to me and there's a load of people behind me waiting, and this guy's got a mask on. He's the only one in the bank wearing a mask. And he's going to the teller, you should wear a mask. And the guy's going, oh yeah, he goes, stop. And then I sat there, I said, don't say anything, just get your money and get out of here. And then I went, and I just couldn't help myself, and I said, why should he wear one? It's a free country, he doesn't want to wear one, doesn't have to wear one. And the guy sort of looks at me and the whole bank goes silent. I'm like, oh my God, it's on. And the guy looks at me and goes, it stops the spread of infection. I said, no, it doesn't. I said, it's about as useful as carting sand around in a shopping trolley. And he goes, it's proven to stop the spread or something like that he said. And I said, which is a joke I've been saying for a long time, I said, mate, if I farted now, you'd smell it, and my fart molecule's a lot bigger than Omicron. And the entire bank laughed. The teller was laughing, the security guard was laughing, everybody in the line was laughing, and an old woman at the back of the line yelled out, "Go Michael!" She must have been a fan of the show. And I was like, oh. And this guy, but what was the interesting thing was when he first started, you could see, I'm morally superior to all of you.
Yeah.
At the end of that, when they were laughing, his shoulders had gone forward, and he was like, what's happened? Why suddenly still no one's wearing a mask? And then you could see that he was going, I thought I was on the right side. You could see him questioning it. And the final thing he went to me was, he said, oh, if you wear a motorbike, you wear a helmet. I said, I do ride a motorbike, I do wear a helmet, because they work. And he just said, oh, thanks. And then he walked out, but he was a meeker man that walked out. And I thought, we want that. And there's no one's pulled out their mask and put it on. And the bank manager, who was the woman serving me, this Indian woman, she leaned around from behind a plastic thing and said, I'm on your side. So I feel that there's a shift, the silent shift turning. And so if they push these mask mandates, I think they're going to find a lot of people are going to go, no.
Well, the thing is, it's not just the mask mandates. That's just the soft landing that Mark McGowan keeps talking about. And, what I do want to say with that is what I get from that is it just shows there is strength in unity.
Yeah.
And with that unity, you can make change.
Yeah.
Now, not that you want him to have to lower his shoulders.
No, I didn't do that for that.
No,
it's just like, stop bullying that guy.
But that's the outcome.
Yeah.
And he sensed that to the sense that, he would be thinking about that. The mask mandates, at the rally, one of the other executive members, Loretta, we spoke to her, and she was saying that the nurses through the pandemics, they don't want to have to wear all of that PPE. They just don't. Her words, we were sweating our boxes off day in, day out, wearing all this stuff. And she said, not only that, we were forced to wear N95. Now, N95 masks are not made to wear for the amount of time through a whole shift. It's designed in surgery to stop, blood matter and things like that, it's going into your mouth. It's not made to stop a virus in that sort of sense. And she said because of the materials that they're made, it causes burning to the back of the throat. And her concern is they do not yet know what the long-term implications are for the nurses that have been in the health system for the past 12 months wearing this PPE for the amount of time that they do. And that just goes to show, is that the right message of them saying, you know, that they need support for that in that self? Somebody needed to stay in the health systems. If there's any empathy, any understanding, that's where it is. But I know, you know, that's where it should be. I know, Michael, that I'm getting the wind up from Clayton behind. We are running low on battery. Thank you very much, Karen. Karen, I should say, you're saying, Michael, she's saying very powerful words that you're speaking there. We certainly hope that you've enjoyed this slow chat. It's been great, Michael.
Yeah, it's been great fun. It's been good to meet you.
Yes, yeah. Likewise. Safe journey. So this is also going out on Cafe Locked Out. That was the reason for the delay. So we hopefully
blame me.
Yeah, we'll go. No, well, it's not blame Michael. It's of all the programs, it's the one that just wouldn't give us one little code, and we've you know, had to go about it in another means.
Well, anyone on Cafe Locked Out will go, of course he pissed with the microphone on. That's him, idiot.
Okay. So there, just any other? Just a quick comment there. The last comment there, if I can. Thanks, Ali. Or from, is it Penny? I can't quite. I think it's Penny. Just saying that she thinks that most people are really just terrified, and the monitor's just blacked out a little bit of the dark and of how dark, things have got. I'm just trying to.
Fear is the virus. Courage is the cure.
Yeah, courage. Yeah. So I guess on that note, we probably won't strain trying to read because, as I say, the monitor's flicking
it's
off.
It's just a blur to me. I can't even read that.
But, it's been great, and people are saying that now that they've really enjoyed the stream. And I can see one of the last people that have come in. You probably would have met her down at the wall this morning.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say the name for fear of being ostracised down at the wall, because that's a battle that is not over yet, and it has been escalating in the past week, as you've probably heard. And but there we go. So from myself, Lindsay from Freedom Media, I want to say special thanks, Clayton behind, who's done all the production work, and underneath the desk, pulling cables out, tracing them back, trying to figure out why everything was working this morning, and then we come in and then some of the things on our side weren't. Ali, who's now been picking up and managing the comments, thank you very much, but most importantly, Michael, this, been a great chat.
Oh, thank you, man.
Safe travels.
Yeah, great.
And so on that note, wherever you find yourself, stay safe and enjoy your evening.
And you're not alone. See ya.